Chapter 556. Shock. At this moment the six of them were extremely shocked. Compared to the spectators below, the six of them knew better what had just happened. They finally had the chance to trap an expert like Wen Lanfeng. Naturally they did not want him to escape. Otherwise, it would be very terrifying if he came looking for them one by one for revenge in the future. Therefore, the six of them used almost all their strength in the joint attack just now. They wanted to get rid of this worry completely. However, to the six of them's disbelief, Wen Lanfeng actually forcefully broke through their all-out attack and broke out of the trap. To the six of them, the strength of the second strongest expert in the cultivation world was not just for show. At this point, the six of them finally understood the gap between them and Wen Lanfeng. He definitely did not issue the challenge on impulse, but it was indeed due to his strength that he had a card up his sleeve. The six of them were well aware of the power produced by the joint attack of six late-stage soul formation experts. In short, any one of them would not be able to withstand such a great power. It should be known that the power of the six people's joint attack was not as simple as adding their strength together. The power they exerted was equivalent to the power of 8 or 9 late-stage soul formation experts. Wen Lanfeng's forceful breaking of the joint attack gave the six people a shock that outsiders could not understand. The six people who were scattered in 6 directions all had unfathomable expressions on their faces. In particular, Yin Baikong's eyes flickered and his heart was filled with regret. He really miscalculated. He did not expect Wen Lanfeng's cultivation to be so high. If he had known earlier, he would not have schemed against him. After the six of them witnessed Wen Lanfeng's strength, none of them dared to take the initiative to attack. Fatty Pei, who had suffered some internal injuries, was still full of spirit and courage. At this moment, his eyes were dark and gloomy. No one knew what he was thinking, but he did not dare to be impulsive anymore. Bing Qingzi's sharp eyes stared at Wen Lanfeng. His lips tightened, but his heart was filled with mixed feelings. The reason why he attacked Wen Lanfeng first, other than the disciples watching, was to protect his master's dignity. In his heart, he more or less thought that he was not too far away from Wen Lanfeng. However, the truth proved that the difference was not just a little. Fatty was injured. Yan Zhuixing's demon eye flickered secretly. He clearly saw Pei Fang's action of quietly wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. Not a single expression on the faces of the six could escape his observation. Although they could not experience the power of this exchange, they could clearly see that the six of them had been frightened by Wen Lanfeng's move. Everyone also sensed that something was amiss from this brief silence. The six of them had been attacking together with an indomitable will just moments ago. Why were there no movements now? When Rui finally heaved a sigh of relief. The old ancestor was more powerful than he had imagined. In the air, the crystal spikes that were hundreds of meters long had already disappeared. Wen Lanfeng stood proudly in the sky with his sword in hand. His long hair fluttered in the wind behind his shoulders. His slender figure stood tall and straight like a god, accepting the admiration of the soul formation stage experts. He looked calm on the surface, but in his heart he was shouting lucky. He was a little too confident in his cultivation after 100 years of seclusion. The combined might of 6 soul formation final stage cultivators was far too powerful. The pressure that they exerted instantly gave people the illusion that they could crush everything. If it was not for the battle with Bai Changchun that allowed him to break through the shackles and reach the realm of being one with the sword as he pleased, he would have been seriously injured even if he did not die. When that huge pressure almost made him immobile, with a sword in hand, he was the sword and the sword was the man. The man borrowed the sword's sharpness, and the sword borrowed the man's power. The man and the sword were one, and the sword was unstoppable. His lifelong cultivation glowed with thousands of sword auras, and they exploded against the strong pressure. It was a magnificent and spectacular scene that appeared out of thin air. Although he had broken through the dangerous situation with force, his body was not much better. His qi and blood were surging and it took him a long time to calm down. No matter what, he had still broken through the joint attack of 6 soul formation final stage cultivators. Wen Lanfeng's confidence soared. The giant silver sword in his hand tilted slightly, and he said proudly in the air, "Everyone, this is just the beginning. Why are you not fighting anymore?" His voice reverberated between heaven and earth, and there was no doubt that the arrogance in his words was unmistakable. The group of people below was amazed. Although he was not a match for Bai Changchun, he was not someone who could be easily defeated by others. Everyone could tell that he despised the 6 soul formation final stage cultivators. "If we don't fight now, when will we fight?" Wen Lanfeng turned his head to look at them, and his long hair danced fiercely in the wind behind his shoulders. His eyes fell on Bing Qingzi and he said indifferently, If you don't fight now, don't blame me for being rude. His words were aggressive, and the prestige of a peerless master fluttered between heaven and earth, which made people feel relaxed and happy. When Rui tightened his lips and his excitement was beyond words. From today onwards, the Wen family would once again stand on the top of all countries. Although the cultivation of Man Hu and his brothers was not as good as the others, they could also see some clues. Their master and the others must have been shocked by the fight just now, and some of them flinched. Wen Lanfeng's strength made them a little uneasy, and they were worried about their master. Yan Juexing's pair of demonic eyes stared at Wen Lanfeng, and he was fascinated, but he was also silent. Wen Lanfeng by Changchun, wait for me. When I, Yan Juexing, succeed in my demonic cultivation, I will definitely compete with you to see who is the peerless master. Bing Qingzi glanced at Yan Juexing in the distance, and thought of the mission he shouldered. He really could not afford to gamble, and his renewed fighting spirit was extinguished again. He sighed, Brother Wen, don't push me too far. I admit that your cultivation is higher than mine, and I admit defeat. There was an uproar below. No one expected that the world-famous master of the Great Snow Mountain would admit defeat so easily under the watchful eyes of so many people. The other 5 people in the air were also shocked, and even Wen Lanfeng was a little surprised. Who would admit defeat when their cultivation reached such a level unless they had no other choice? Man who knew his master the most, heard the helplessness in his master's words. He suddenly turned around, looked at Yan Juexing with tears in his eyes, and transmitted a message. Yan Juexing, master endured the humiliation for you. Otherwise, with master's noble and virtuous character, he would not have suffered such a great humiliation. The other 3 junior brothers bit their lips and kept silent with pale faces. Yan Juexing saw Bing Qingzi's gaze at him before he admitted defeat, and it was full of infinite meaning. Although he did not think that Bing Qingzi could be Wen Lanfeng's opponent, and he did not know why Wen Lanfeng valued him so much, he still appreciated this kindness. He let out a slight sigh and nodded with a dignified expression. Then he transmitted his voice back. Don't worry. Wait until the day I master the demonic arts. I will help Senior Bing get back at Wen Lanfeng 1,000-fold for the humiliation he suffered today. It's good that you understand. Man whose lips trembled and he turned his head. Wen Lanfeng looked at Bing Qingzi with a somewhat complicated expression, and then said indifferently, since you have admitted defeat, it's none of your business. Since Bing Qingzi had said such words based on his character, he would not continue to force him. If it was Yu Qianqiu, he would definitely think that this old guy must have some ulterior motives for enduring such humiliation. If he did not kill him, he would simply be looking for trouble. Kill. Bing Qingzi cupped his hands towards the other 5, and even more apologetically shook his head towards Yin Baikong and Hu Changchun. Under the dumbfounded gazes of the 5, he gloomily flashed away. In a flash, he appeared between Man Hu and the others. The lords looked at him with some puzzlement. Master. The few junior brothers softly called out. Bing Qingzi calmly waved his hand and said, It's all right. Master's skill is inferior to others, and he brought humiliation upon himself. After giving Yan Juexing a meaningful look, he once again looked towards the sky. What about you guys? Wen Lanfeng asked. He slowly turned around in the air with his sword in hand, and stared at Yin Baikong. Yin Baikong's face froze there awkwardly. Don't look at me. What's the point of fighting? Even the 6 of us together are not your match. Now that Bing Qingzi, who is the strongest among us, has left, what the hell? But to make him admit defeat in front of so many people, he really needs to accumulate the courage to do so. In this difficult situation, he cast his gaze towards Pei Fong and said, Fatty Pei, what do you mean by this? Do you still want to fight? I will listen to your opinion. I also think so. Hu Changshou immediately added fuel to the fire without any trace of politeness. Qi Jiujuan and Ouyang De looked at each other. They were on the same side as Pei Fong, so it was impossible for them to say such words in public. However, it was not good for them to express their opinions, so they could only remain silent. The group below looked at each other. The 5 people above had split up and there was going to be a good show to watch. This daddy has had a few hundred of your women. You are clearly trying to trick me. When have you ever listened to my opinion? You even wanted to kill me just now. Pei Fong was so angry that the fat on his face trembled uncontrollably. He glared at Yin Baikong, wanting nothing more than to swallow this old man alive. This old man was too sinister, always scheming against others. Wen Lanfeng seemed to have just remembered that there was someone standing above him. He coldly snorted and said, I don't like people standing above me and talking. If you don't want to die, then get down here and answer me. Pei Fong's expression was very interesting. He suppressed his anger and helplessly flashed to Qi Jiujuan's side in a huff. The blue-faced bewitching blade that he had used to attack Wen Lanfeng just now was placed behind his back. However, its body was too fat and it looked a little out of place. Wen Lanfeng, we are in the wrong today. I will apologize to you. Where it is possible to let people go, one should forgive them. Pei Fong finally spoke softly, which was equivalent to admitting defeat in disguise. However, he still wanted to save his last bit of face. When Lanfeng glanced at Bing Qingzi, who had already left the arena, he suddenly turned his gaze back and said indifferently, "Just now, everyone joined forces and seemed to want to kill me. Don't you think the saying, where it is possible to let people go, one should forgive them, is ridiculous? Since you have already made a move, either admit defeat and leave, break a finger and leave, or fight me. Fatty Pei, there is no need to say anything else. When Lanfeng, don't go too far." Although Pei Fong was broad-minded and fat, his temper was also famous in the cultivation world. As soon as he finished speaking, Wen Lanfeng suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, there were already countless Wen Lanfeng in the air. Chapter 557. After a quick count, there were about 100 of them. The entire area instantly became deathly silent, and no one could feel the flow of air. 100 giant silver swords, 100 Wen Lanfeng, all stared at Pei Fong. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became tense. Anyone could see that Wen Lanfeng was about to take the initiative to attack. "They're not phantoms." Someone below exclaimed, "It's the Qi manipulation form." Wen Lanfeng's cultivation has actually reached the realm of Qi manipulation form. This is a legendary immortal technique. Yan Zhuixing's demon eye flickered and found that the 100 Wen Lanfengs were not phantoms. But if they were real, they did not seem to be real. He turned around and asked, "Senior Bing, what's the Qi manipulation form?" Bing Qingzi squinted his eyes and stared at the sky, shaking his head. "It's not the Qi manipulation form. It's the Thousand Search Sword Skills extraordinary sword-splitting art. It's said that when practiced to a high level, one can split into thousands of clones to attack at the same time. That's how the name Thousand Search Sword Skill came about. It seems that Wen Lanfeng has not reached that level yet." Yan Zhuixing replied with an "oh," and those around him who did not understand were enlightened. Looking at the sky again, they found it funny. What a bad karma. Previously, there were 6 people surrounding Wen Lanfeng, but in the blink of an eye, there were 100 Wen Lanfengs surrounding him. "Fatty Pei, make up your mind. I can't wait for too long." This was a threat. The 100 Wen Lanfengs spoke at the same time, and their voices reverberated in the air as if there were 100 people speaking at the same time. Wen Lanfeng was still Wen Lanfeng. No matter how ruthless he was, he could not be so ruthless. If it was Yu Qianshou, it would be good if he did not sneak attack. He would definitely not do it in such a dignified manner. He would kill those who deserved to be killed. Wen Lanfeng, don't go too far. Pei Fong held the blue-faced bewitching blade in his hand. Looking around, he found that he had been locked by Wen Lanfeng's aura. He wanted to escape. Although his ability to escape was rare, he did not know if he could escape from Wen Lanfeng's hands. After all, the difference in cultivation was too big. Yin Baikong and Hu Changshou exchanged glances. They were somewhat pleased with themselves as they waited to see Pei Fong make a fool of himself. Qi Jiujuan was the one who felt the most helpless. Fatty Pei could have stood anywhere, but he just had to stand next to him. Now he was also surrounded by 100 Wen Lanfengs. To help or not to help, it was really a headache. Pei Fong's voice had just fallen when one of the 100 Wen Lanfengs transformed into a white shadow. A cold light flashed like rolling thunder, like a flying immortal from beyond the heavens, and he finally made his move. A simple attack that abandoned all extravagance was unleashed. Everyone's eyes were unblinking. Qi Jiujuan did not have much time to think and subconsciously teleported to Ouyangda's side. Pei Fong wasn't someone to be trifled with. After all, he was a late-stage soul formation cultivator. The blue-faced demon saber in his hand glowed with a demonic blue light. It suddenly expanded, forming a saber aura that was more than 10 meters long. Dang! The sound reverberated through the heavens and earth. One blue and one white collided, stirring up an uproar. The white shadow disappeared. Pei Fong calmed down after this exchange. Although his arms were numb from the impact and the blood in his body was tumbling, he realized that the other party was only SOSO. It wasn't that he couldn't withstand it. As long as he could withstand it for a while, the others would naturally know what to do if they still cared about their reputation. However, it was too early for him to be happy. When Lanfeng could control more than one avatar at a time. Swoosh! One avatar moved, followed by a second, a third, a fourth. After Pei Fong dealt with a few, not only did his arms become numb from the impact, but his scalp also felt numb. His heart turned cold. This was because he realized that when one avatar was defeated, another would immediately appear. There were always more than 100 avatars. If this continued, he wouldn't be able to withstand them for long with his cultivation. The frequency of Wen Lanfeng's avatars attacking became faster and faster, forcing Pei Fong to use a life-saving move that consumed a lot of his cultivation. He shouted, "Show off my blue face." Pei Fong instantly turned into a blue fat top in the air. A fat top with many blue wings. He spun in the air in a dazzling blue light. It was very beautiful, desperately dealing with the attacks that came like a storm. Bang, bang, bang. The rapid sound of explosions rang in the air. It was simply deafening. When Lanfeng's hundreds of doppelgangers wielded a huge silver sword, bringing out streaks of silver lightning. Just like the battle with Bai Changchun at the 1,000-Mile Lake, they transformed into a huge, gorgeous white lotus flower in full bloom. In the eyes of everyone in the air, a huge white lotus in full bloom was beating a fat top with blue wings. It looked beautiful, but everyone understood that it was definitely not just beautiful. The power contained in it was terrifying, and they could feel it from the surging aftershocks of the battle. Everyone could act as if it was none of their business and just watch the show. They didn't know that Pei Fong was already suffering in the battle. In the high-speed rotation, the blue demon saber was constantly switched between his left and right hands. Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was much higher than his. Such a dense frequency of attacks shook his arm until it was numb, and the saber almost fell out of his hand. He simply couldn't hold the saber with one hand, and could only keep switching between both hands. Pei Fong, who was clenching his teeth and resisting, didn't even realize how ugly his face was. His chubby and rosy face was now as white as a sheet of paper, deathly pale. It was only when blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth and his nose that he felt something was wrong and panicked. At this point, it was impossible to find a short gap to escape. Wen Lanfeng's attacks were frighteningly dense, and he didn't even have the slightest chance to escape. He also had to desperately protect his body, not daring to show any flaws. Otherwise, under such dense attacks, a small flaw could take his life. After Yan Zhuixing's demonic eyes flashed, he sighed with lingering fear and said, "Senior Bing, Pei Fong's 7 orifices are bleeding. He's already injured and I'm afraid he can't hold on any longer." Man Hu and the others turned around. With their cultivation, they couldn't even see the faces of people at such a distance, let alone such a high tempo and intense battle. Some people around looked at Yan Zhuixing with disdain. The meaning in their eyes was clearly saying, "We can't even see clearly, and you, a puny early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator, dare to boast shamelessly." Yan Zhuixing was slightly startled, and he knew that he had forgotten himself. Bing Qingzi, however, was a sensible person. He looked at Yan Zhuixing with some gratification and transmitted a message, "Your demonic eyes have begun to develop?" Yan Zhuixing smiled faintly and transmitted a message back, "I'm still far from mastery, just a small mastery. However, these messy appearances can't confuse my demonic eyes. Under my demonic eyes, everything is revealed and there's nowhere to hide." Good. Bing Qingzi uttered a word in satisfaction. He didn't say anything else and continued to watch the battle with a smile on his face. "Qi Zhujuan, O Yangda, what are you waiting for? Are you going to watch me die?" Pei Fong's cry for help came from the loud explosions and he seemed to be crying. It was very urgent. With such a powerful and intensive attack, the people below felt their blood run cold. Hearing that an expert at the late stage of soul formation was beaten to tears, one could imagine the pressure Fatty Pei was under. Fortunately, he was an expert at the late stage of soul formation. If it was someone weaker, he would probably die under such attacks. Qi Zhujuan and O Yangda, who heard the cry for help, looked at each other and were secretly communicating with each other. Suddenly, Wen Lanfeng's cold snort sounded around them, as if it was directed at the two of them. The two of them glanced around alertly and their pupils shrank. They saw about 200 Wen Lanfengs around them, staring at them coldly. The two of them were speechless. They didn't expect that Wen Lanfeng could create another 200 doppelgangers to deal with them while fighting one at a time. It was a matter of life and death. They wanted to help, but they were afraid of following in Pei Fong's footsteps. They were vigilant but didn't dare to move. The people below were in an uproar again. It seemed that Wen Lanfeng was dealing with Pei Fong with ease and didn't use his full strength at all. If so many doppelgangers attacked at the same time, Fatty Pei would probably be finished. Pei Fong naturally discovered it as well. However, his life was at stake, so it was naturally more important to protect himself. He shouted again, "In Bai Kong Hu Changsho, quickly come and help me. My blue palace has 2 blue demon beast eggs. I'm willing to give them to you for free after this." In Bai Kong and Hu Changsho's eyes suddenly lit up when they heard this. The crowd was even more shocked. Everyone knew that blue demon beasts were not ordinary demon beasts. They were rare spirit beasts in the cultivation world with extraordinary power and could be considered priceless treasures. Fatty Pei's blue palace had one, and it was the treasure of the palace. No one expected it to lay eggs. In Bai Kong transmitted his voice to Hu Changsho. An adult blue demon beast is more powerful than an early spirit-severing realm expert. This damn fatty is really cunning. The blue demon beast laid eggs, but he didn't even leak a word about it. Hu Changsho glanced at him. "You're even more sinister than him. Who knows what you're doing behind the scenes?" Huyin said, "What do you mean? You want to bet?" Halfway through the transmission, the two of them jumped in fright at the same time. It was because 200 Wen Lanfangs had appeared around the two of them, glaring at them like tigers watching their prey, ready to attack at any time. The two of them immediately became vigilant. Spirit beasts were good but not as important as their lives. Without their lives, what use would a spirit beast have? Wen Lanfeng's 200 doppelgangers were truly frightening. His cultivation was a bit unfathomable. Brother Wen, everyone knows we're enemies with this damn fatty." In Bai Kong laughed awkwardly. What he meant was, don't listen to this damn fatty's nonsense. We won't help him, don't misunderstand. The crowd watched Wen Lanfeng fight a late-stage soul formation expert and intimidate 4 in a row. They were speechless. They really didn't know how many more doppelgangers he could create. Pei Fong almost vomited blood from In Bai Kong's words. He was already on the verge of collapse, and now that he was distracted, his weakness was immediately revealed. Not good, but it was already too late. A sharp pain came from his hand, and the blue demon saber had already left his hand. A flurry of footsteps came from all directions, whipping at his body. Chapter 558. Outside the fog forest, Nongzhu was wandering around. According to reliable sources, Yu Qianshou was hiding inside, so Nongzhu tried his best to find him, but to no avail. After wandering around for a few days, Nongzhu felt that something was wrong. According to her understanding of Yu Qianshou, that guy was a restless person. Why would he stay inside? Coincidentally, she received news that a guy called Niu Yid had cheated a lot of spirit stones from later Zhou. Nongzhu's first reaction was that this Niu Yid might be Yu Qianshou. However, when she heard that this Niu Yid was a soul formation expert, Nongzhu denied her previous guess. Yu Qianshou could change his appearance, but his cultivation couldn't be faked. However, Nongzhu was very curious about who this Niu Yid was. Even with her vast knowledge in the cultivation world, she had never heard of this person. Out of curiosity, she decided to go to Ghost Manor to take a look. Others might be afraid of the one-armed old man, but he didn't care. Before she left, she suddenly heard another shocking news. In the sacred land of Baiwan, when Lanfeng defeated 6 late-stage soul formation experts, Pei Fong was seriously injured, and one of his palms was cut off by Wen Lanfeng's sword. There were also 5 experts who admitted defeat to Wen Lanfeng. The most baffling thing was that Wen Lanfeng had said that he admired Yu Qianshou very much after hearing that he was overflowing with talent. He also warned the soul formation experts who were preparing to deal with Yu Qianshou that he wouldn't sit idly by. In the southeast of the fog forest, several cultivators were preparing all kinds of food and flattering Nongzhu in a large pile of rocks. There were also a few who were telling Nongzhu the latest news. Holding a roasted muntjac leg, Nongzhu squatted on the big rock and stared at the people who were looking at her in shock. "Is this news true? Are you sure?" "Senior Nongzhu, we would never dare to lie to you." One of them patted his chest and guaranteed, "This news is absolutely true. Right now, this matter has already spread like wildfire. There's no way it's fake. Eat and drink well. I'll go ask Wen Lanfeng." Nongzhu threw the roasted muntjac leg into the man's arms and disappeared into thin air. The man hugged the oily roasted muntjac leg and looked at the others. In the plum garden of the Ghost Manor, Yu Qianshou, who had extorted all the countries, used his free time to practice the animal show in the garden. This was something that he would practice whenever he was free. He had always been very confident in the things that Bai Changchun came up with, so he would practice hard whenever he was free. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing didn't understand what their boss was doing, but it didn't matter whether they understood or not. The task that Yu Qianshou gave them was to inquire about the news of the cultivation world every day. The two of them were happy to be the best among the wandering cultivators. When Yu Qianqiu heard the news that Wen Lanfeng defeated 6 cultivators at the late soul formation stage, he was really amazed. It would be a lie to say that he was not envious. However, he was still quite disdainful of the fact that Wen Lanfeng beat Pei Fang seriously but didn't kill him. It was obvious that he had already offended Pei Fang, but he still left a source of trouble. Would Wen Lanfeng say that he was good? When he heard Wen Lanfeng say that he would support him, Yu Qianqiu was completely speechless. He wandered around the plum garden with his hands behind his back, looking at the sky and then the ground. In short, he was full of questions. What could he do? There were old branches in the plum garden, but there were no plums to compete with. Yu Qianqiu wandered around the bare plum forest for a long time, but he really couldn't figure out why. Although he had long heard of Wen Lanfeng, the love addict, he had never seen him before. He didn't even know how tall, short, fat, or thin he was. After thinking about it, he could only think of one possibility. He knew that Wen Lanfeng went to the demon domain to challenge his master. If an expert like Wen Lanfeng came out to support him, it must be related to the demon domain. Old Bai didn't seem like someone who would ask for help. Could it be related to Nongzhu? Yu Qianqiu snapped a plum branch absent-mindedly. He guessed that it was possible, but he couldn't be sure. Who cares? I can't be bothered to think about it. It's not a bad thing anyway. Yu Qianqiu muttered and threw away the plum branch in his hand. He waved his hand to summon his 2 subordinates who were reporting the news and asked, "Are you ready for tomorrow?" The 2 replied, "Everything is ready." Yu Qianqiu nodded with satisfaction. Fu Chun asked hesitantly, "Boss, are we really going to go with whoever gives us the most money?" "Of course." Yu Qianqiu wandered away with his hands behind his back. The 2 who were left behind looked at each other in confusion. Ghost Manor welcomed the same liveliness it had 10 days ago. Inexperienced loose cultivators crowded around the manor. There seemed to be even more people than the last time. There was no other reason than the arrival of a large group of experts. However, this time the experts didn't seem to be in a good mood. They had to suffer in silence. As long as the people involved knew what was going on, they wouldn't let the surrounding loose cultivators know. However, the loose cultivators weren't fools. They could guess what was going on even if they didn't say it out loud. These people had been cheated of so much money. They would probably be punished by their sect elders when they got back. However, Nyoye didn't go too far this time. He didn't ask them to pay for the queue. After Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing took the jade archives from the crowd, they said, "Please wait a moment." Then they entered the plum garden together. Most of the crowd waited silently for the final result, then prepared to rush back to report. Among the crowd, Yulan looked around looking for Guan Zhangkai. After suffering a loss, he finally understood that Guan Zhangkai was trying to warn him, but he didn't appreciate it and fell for it. Now that he thought about it, he felt sorry for himself and his old friend's good intentions. To his disappointment, he didn't see Guan Zhangkai. Instead, he saw Guan Zhangkai's junior brother, Niesheng. Yulan squeezed through the crowd curiously and came to Niesheng's side. He asked, "Brother Nie, why isn't your senior brother Guan Zhangkai here?" Niesheng glanced at him and knew that he was his eldest senior brother's old friend. He expressionlessly replied, "Master has other matters for senior brother to attend to. He left this to me." Seeing his indifferent expression, Yulan softly said, "Oh." Then he didn't say anything else. One mustn't wash one's dirty linen in public. In fact, there were some things that Niesheng couldn't tell him. 10 days ago, when Guan Zhangkai returned, he nervously told Sikongju about how he had been cheated. As a result, Sikongju flew into a rage. To Sikongju and the World Commerce Association, 100 million spirit stones wasn't a big deal. However, this eldest senior brother had embarrassed him time and time again. It was inexcusable to cover up for him. He wouldn't be able to explain himself to his superiors and subordinates. Even if he wanted to protect his own, he couldn't be too protective. Thus, he sealed Guan Zhangkai's dantian on the spot, stripped him of all his rights in the World Commerce Association, and locked him up. As for the rights that originally belonged to Guan Zhangkai, they were handed over to his second disciple, Niesheng. At this moment, Guan Zhangkai was locked up in the cold, pitch-black prison of the World Commerce Association, sighing. He couldn't figure it out himself. He didn't know what kind of bad luck he'd run into recently. How could he be so unlucky? In the plum garden of Ghost Manor, Yu Qianqiu and 2 of his subordinates were looking through a large pile of jade archives on a table. "Boss, other than the price quoted, there are also some touching words added," Qin Jiaxing said cheerfully. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly, a bunch of insensitive people trying to stir up emotions. Only looking at the price. Damn it. They have the nerve to ask for 100 million. He casually tossed a jade archive in his hand onto the floor, shattering it into pieces with a crack. Qin Jiaxing chuckled and loosened his grip. Another crisp crack rang out. On the other side, Fu Chun frowned as she held a jade archive in her hand. Boss, there are some words added in here as well. However, they aren't touching words but more like threats and intimidation. Crazy? Wait, don't smash it. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the jade archives in his hand and said to the two of them, leave behind all of them that carry a threatening or intimidating tone. This is evidence of their crimes. When I have the chance, I'll settle the score with them. How dare they threaten and intimidate me? The three of them carefully selected for almost half a day before they finally picked out the 10 jade archives that offered the highest price. Without exception, these 10 jade archives were backed by one of the top nations in the cultivation world. The lowest price was also 300 million high-grade spirit stones. The one who offered the highest price did not surprise Yu Qianqiu. As expected, it was the wealthiest and most influential World Commerce Association in the world. TSK. Look at their imposing manner. This is what you call an exorbitant demand. Cut to the chase. A fixed price of 1 billion. How refreshing. Ah. Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed into slits as he laughed. Qin Jiaxing exclaimed, the World Commerce Association's wealth is indeed frightening. Compared to the second highest bidder who offered 600 million, it's a whopping 400 million. Fu Chun shook her head and said, they're determined to get it. Yu Qianqiu handed the jade archive to Fu Chun and said, go and announce the highest price that the World Commerce Association has offered, lest people say that I'm being unfair. Also, invite the people from the World Commerce Association in and we'll discuss when to pay. The group of people outside the door was already in a bad mood. Now that they had to wait for almost half a day, none of them had a pleasant expression on their faces. Most importantly, many of them did not hold out much hope for this segment of the bidding. If the price wasn't high, it would be a miracle if they relied on the emotional and intimidating words in the jade archives. The higher-ups had never seen Yo Yid in person, so they had no idea what kind of person he was. The moment Fu Chun appeared at the main entrance, she attracted everyone's attention. He didn't beat around the bush and raised the jade archive, saying, the highest bidder, the World Commerce Association, 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. 1 billion? There was an uproar outside. This price was indeed a little too high. Immediately there was a flurry of discussion. I'm afraid that only the World Commerce Association would dare to offer such a price. The World Commerce Association is indeed the World Commerce Association. They're extraordinarily rich. The crowd's gazes landed on the silent Nie Sheng. The latter's face was taut, and there was no sign of joy or pride after winning the bidding. Fu Chun ignored the crowd's discussion. She swept her gaze around and did not see Guan Zhongkai of the World Commerce Association. She then raised the jade archive in her hand and said in a loud voice, Senior Nyo wishes to invite an esteemed guest from the World Commerce Association into the Plum Gardens for a meeting. May I know who it is? Nie Sheng walked out. Fu Chun was slightly taken aback. She then raised her hand and said, please come in. Chapter 559. He politely led Nie Sheng in, looking back every few steps, afraid that this esteemed guest would bump into something or step on a pebble and fall. Such a careful attitude made Nie Sheng feel uncomfortable all over, and he almost got goosebumps all over his body. They followed the stone path, passed through the plum forest, then climbed the steps and entered the main hall. A middle-aged man was sitting in the middle of the main hall with his legs crossed, sipping on a cup of tea. Only that Nyo Yid could sit so casually in such a high position. Nie Sheng naturally wouldn't look down on him just because he looked young. The cultivation world never judged one's age based on one's appearance. Besides, he had heard Guan Zhongkai mention that this person's cultivation was frighteningly high. Just the terrifying aura he emitted could suppress Guan Zhongkai to the point where he couldn't move. Before he came, Master Sikongju had repeatedly told him that if the other party's words offended him, he had to be patient and bring him to world commerce first. World commerce, Nie Sheng greets Senior Nyo. Nie Sheng bowed respectfully. Ichem? Nie Sheng? Yu Qianqiu raised his head in slight surprise and sized him up. What are you doing here? Where's Guan Zhongkai? Nie Sheng was stunned by his question, then avoided the first question and answered, my senior brother was sent by my master to do something else. Yu Qianqiu also realized that his way of asking was problematic and laughed. It's the same, it doesn't matter who comes. He put down the teacup and stood up. You're Guan Zhongkai's junior brother? TSK. Looks like you're much more polite than your senior brother. That senior brother of yours. He's quite daring, actually daring to hit my people in front of me. I had to punish him. Nie Xing frowned and gave a perfunctory yes. When Guan Zhangkai went back, he really didn't mention anything about beating people up. He just kept talking about how arrogant Nyoyid was. So there was actually such an inside story. No wonder Nyoyid took away all the spirit stones in his bag. Was Guan Zhangkai taught a lesson by your master when he got back? Yu Qianzhou suddenly asked. No, my master felt that senior brother didn't do his job well and made senior unhappy, so he sent someone else. Nie Xing flatly denied. Ah, that's good. Yu Qianzhou smiled meaningfully. Then, his expression turned serious and he said in a serious tone, let's get back to business. When are you going to give me the 1 billion upper spiritual stones? Nie Xing was startled. 1 billion high-grade spirit stones is not a small amount, no one carries it with them all the time. Naturally, we have to wait until senior gets to World Commerce Headquarters to give. Headquarters? Yu Qianzhou frowned and said, you mean we have to go to Cornucopia? Yes. Nie Xing nodded and said, 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. Apart from the headquarters, the other branches are unable to gather such a large amount of spirit stones. In other words, if I don't go to the headquarters of the World Chamber of Commerce, I won't be able to get this money? Yu Qianzhou said mockingly, if I go and you don't give it to me, will I be unable to do anything to you? World II brother Yu Xing Xing, worse I Yu Xing Xing Yu. Nie Xing's expression did not change as he replied respectfully, senior is too serious. Since senior is going to head to the headquarters after taking the money, why don't you go directly to the headquarters to get the money? That way we won't have to trouble ourselves. What's more, senior will be a member of the World Chamber of Commerce in the future. How can you say that you can't leave? Unless senior doesn't want to stay in world commerce. If that's the case, please speak frankly. We won't disturb you anymore. Yu Qianzhou was stunned by his words. He looked at Nie Xing again and realized that this guy was much stronger than his senior brother. You're right. Yu Qianzhou smiled and said, it shouldn't be a problem for this gold casting city branch to mobilize 1 or 200 million superior grade spirit stones, right? Nie Xing's eyes flashed. He didn't understand what he meant. He said, give me some time. If there are no accidents, there shouldn't be a problem. He left a way out in his words and didn't give a definite answer. Deposit. I want 200 million superior grade spirit stones as a deposit, in case you go back on your word and I don't get a single spirit stone, Yu Qianzhou said bluntly. Once I get the deposit, I'll immediately depart for the World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters. This. Nie Xing said, I can't make the decision on this. I'll have to report this to my master. I'll give you 1 day. If you're late, I won't wait. I'll find someone else to work with. Yu Qianzhou said indifferently, see the guest out. Fu Chun walked over and raised her hand, please. Nie Xing didn't waste time. He cupped his hands and said, goodbye. He then turned and strode away. After the two of them walked far away, Yu Qianzhou slowly walked out of the hall. He went down the steps and wandered around in the plum forest with his hands behind his back. He looked like he was looking for ants. When Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing returned, they saw that he was thinking about something. They didn't disturb him and quietly left. As he swayed back and forth, the laughter from outside suddenly disappeared. Yu Qianzhou looked up and was instantly stunned. He didn't know what was going on. He actually walked out of the plum garden. Maybe he was too engrossed in his thoughts. The wandering cultivators around him looked at him with awe. Yu Qianzhou smiled and turned to walk back. As he turned, he suddenly saw a familiar face of a wandering cultivator in the corner. He couldn't help but be startled. That wandering cultivator saw him staring at him and bowed respectfully. Senior Nyo. Have we met somewhere before? Yu Qianzhou asked. When the wandering cultivator heard this, his gaze was a little evasive. He immediately regained his composure and said, I met Senior a few times at Ghost Manor. I didn't expect Senior to remember me. What's your name? Yi City. Yu Qianzhou responded and looked him up and down. He realized that this wandering cultivator's cultivation level was only in the early core formation realm. He didn't say anything and returned to the plum garden. After walking a few rounds in the depths of the plum forest, he gradually remembered where he met this wandering cultivator. When he brought Ze to supporting Immortal Island, he coincidentally met a group of fans who admired him in Myriad Fragrance Garden. At that time he even went up to them and chatted for a while. He even gave them spirit stones and storage bags. This wandering cultivator just now was the one who stood in front of him and talked to him at that time. My memory isn't bad, so it should be right. Strange. Why would a disciple of supporting Immortal Island come here? Yu Qianqiu frowned and muttered. He narrowed his eyes and decided to investigate. Later, Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing returned. Yu Qianqiu immediately ordered them to secretly investigate this wandering cultivator called Yi City, and not let others find out. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know that the Chinese cultivation world and the Yen father and son who were supported by the various countries had been in a stalemate for a long time. They more or less felt that something was wrong. The enemy seemed to be delaying and had no intention of fighting with them. It seemed like they were waiting for something. Therefore, the upper echelons of the sects that had participated in the trials in the demon realm and the devil Dao secretly made an exception. In the end, they unanimously made a decision. The 6 sects each sent 10 disciples who had never shown their faces in the cultivation world. After swearing a heavy oath, they secretly snuck out of the Chinese cultivation world and went to the various countries to gather information. This was the first time in the Chinese cultivation world that they had done this. The reason was that they were afraid that they would be at a disadvantage without knowing it. The 6 sects sent 60 disciples with mediocre cultivation levels. Just like that, they were scattered to various countries with heavy responsibilities to carry out their missions. It couldn't be helped. Those with high cultivation levels and a bit of status in the sects were not so easy to order around. Who would be willing to take this risk? Almost all of the 60 disciples who snuck in chose to be wandering cultivators in foreign countries because they didn't have the qualifications to join a sect. However, in a situation where they were unfamiliar with the people and the status of the wandering cultivators here was not as good as that of the Chinese cultivation world. In the end, more than half of the 60 people were lost in various conflicts. Only the fittest survived. In the end, there were less than 20 people who stubbornly carried out their missions. When these people officially came into contact with this world, they were shocked. They found that not only were there many experts here, but there were also the legendary soul formation stage experts. Moreover, there were more than 1 or 2 of them. Almost every country had one. The 6 great sects were shocked when such an important piece of news was relayed back. This matter was of great importance. The 6 sects announced this news in the Cultivation Alliance. Immediately, it caused an uproar in the Cultivation Alliance. This time the various sects couldn't sit still. In order to verify whether the 6 sects were telling the truth or not, the sects sent out unprecedented spies to sneak into the various countries. In fact, this was what should be done in a state of war. If others knew everything about you but you knew nothing about them, how could you fight the war? In fact, it was far easier for China to inquire about the news of the various countries than for the other countries to inquire about China. This was because China's tradition of xenophobia and seclusion had both advantages and disadvantages. If other countries sent people to sneak into China, they would be easily discovered. Then they would be hunted down and expelled. It was very difficult for people with unknown origins to gain a foothold. Therefore, for the first time, all kinds of news about the various countries were continuously transmitted back to the Chinese cultivation world. What made the sects sigh was that Yu Qianqiu, who was forced to leave the Cultivation Alliance, thought he was hiding somewhere. Who knew that it was really as he said when he left the Cultivation Alliance? The Cultivation Alliance has a lot of misunderstandings about me. If that's the case, why should I stay and be hated by others? It's good to leave. The world is big, but there will always be a place for me, Yu Qianqiu. Whether I'm in the Cultivation Alliance or not, I will secretly support the Chinese cultivation world. My sincerity can be witnessed by the sun and the moon. Many people could still vaguely remember what Yu Qianqiu said when he left the Cultivation Alliance. Now that they thought about it, how desperate and sad he must have been at that time. But even so, he was still fighting for the Chinese cultivation world, wandering alone in a foreign country, fighting alone. What a good young man. What an outstanding young man. He could be called a national hero. He was wholeheartedly for his country, but was forced into a corner by the people of his own country. Yet, he resolutely embarked on another journey without regret and continued to fight for the Chinese cultivation world. Thousands of ferocious foreign cultivators had encircled and intercepted Yu Qianqiu, but they had been completely defeated by him. When they recalled his words, "My heart is pure and sincere, and the sun and moon can bear witness," many of them burst into tears. Chapter 560. Back in the day, Yu Qianqiu was known as a scum and a madman in China's cultivation world. It was really a big name that everyone didn't know. However, to those lowly disciples of the various sects, Yu Qianqiu's rebellious and unruly experience of struggling to succeed made them crazily idolize him. Because everyone was born at the grassroots, Yu Qianqiu's success was a kind of hope for them. Although not everyone could succeed, at least it was a kind of hope that could be seen. Indeed, because of this, many people were affected. As for whether Yu Qianqiu was a scum or a madman, what did that have to do with them? Yu Qianqiu had never been defeated, nor had he ever gone crazy. Whether he was a scum or not was a madman, that was what the higher-ups said. At least those grassroots disciples who had come into contact with Yu Qianqiu, their view of Yu Qianqiu was completely different from that of the higher-ups. The Yu Qianqiu they saw and the Yu Qianqiu that came out of their mouths was so amiable, so loved. No matter how unremarkable a disciple you were, Yu Qianqiu would not be like some people, not even giving you a proper look. He would talk with you enthusiastically, he would put you on the same level as him and talk with you enthusiastically. He did not have the slightest arrogance of a famous cultivator. Many lowly disciples had received greetings from him. This could be proved by many people. Everyone said that he was vicious and merciless, a scum, a madman, but in fact he hated evil as if it was his enemy. It was just some people deliberately slandering and framing him because of jealousy. This was the Yu Qianqiu that those grassroots disciples spoke of. The cultivation world was originally a place where the strong preyed on the weak, or where the strong bullied the weak. Being in a sect, those young disciples felt that there were many unfairness, but very few dared to openly rebel. At this time, Yu Qianqiu had become the target of their secret discussion. The story of how he had dealt with a certain person's son or grandson when he was still in the core formation stage was brought up again and again. The more he spoke, the more excited he became. He wished he could be Yu Qianqiu and jump out to beat up a certain someone. This kind of talk was extremely contagious among the lower levels of the various sections. The more oppressive they were, the more it would spread. In fact, many new disciples grew up listening to Yu Qianqiu's legends. There were even some radicals who had tattooed the words Yu Qianqiu on their arms, chests, and backs. It was quite a ferocious sight. Speaking of Yu Qianqiu's tattoo, there was an interesting story. Recently, 2 new gangs have risen in the Wuxia cultivation world. One is called Hong Gang, and the other is called Green Gang. These 2 gangs have been committing crimes everywhere in the cultivation world. It can't be said that they have done all kinds of evil, but they have done everything from burning, killing, and robbing. Moreover, they have been constantly recruiting loose cultivators. Not long after, the number of members of these 2 gangs has reached over 1,000. Different from the usual motley crew, these 2 gangs are 2 extremely secretive organizations. Moreover, they have quite standard training methods. It made people wonder if they were in cahoots with each other. When they come out to commit crimes, they will fight wherever they are pointed to, and they are not afraid of death. Many sects that were harassed repeatedly sent people out to annihilate them. However, these 2 gangs come and go like the wind. They have always been fighting as a guerrilla and never settled down in a fixed location. When they are about to commit a crime, they gather from all directions, and after the crime is done, they scatter in all directions. They should have a unique way of contacting each other. No one knows where their lair is. Because it is a very special time, all the sects are always on guard against the attack of the limitless island. It is impossible for them to spend a lot of time to transfer their elites to look for them. Moreover, most of the people in these 2 gangs are low-level cultivators, so no one thinks that they can cause too much harm. As a result, taking advantage of this opportunity, the 2 gangs are getting more and more powerful. Moreover, these 2 gangs have dozens of experts who are very good at fighting. Ordinary small sects are not their opponents at all. In order to avoid disaster, whether it is the small sects of the righteous path or the small sects of the devil path, they are all paying protection fees. There is no other way. If they do not pay, they will directly burn, kill, and rob. Who asked the big sects of the righteous path and devil path to not have the time to annihilate them for the time being? These 2 gangs are also very fun. Not to mention that they do not invade each other, they are also very clear about collecting protection fees from those small sections. Green Gang collects money from the devil path, Hong Gang collects money from the righteous path. When they meet a tough opponent, the 2 gangs will join hands to deal with it. Although in the eyes of those big sects, they are just a group of habitual bandits. When the time is right, they can be annihilated at any time. However, in the eyes of those small sects, these 2 gangs have become the managers of the 2 small sects of the righteous path and devil path. If there is a sect that is not obedient, these 2 gangs will find an opportunity to sweep away the obstacles of that sect's upper echelon and support someone else to take the position. With strict organizational discipline and some clever methods, the 2 gangs unexpectedly became 2 forces that cannot be ignored in a short period of time. The various sects did not expect that these tangled loose cultivators can actually become something. Just when they are fighting against Limitless Island, the Cultivation World Alliance thought of recruiting Hong Gang and Green Gang to join. However, the leaders of these two gangs are very secretive. So far no one has seen them, so there is no way to recruit them. Once, dozens of new disciples of the 10,000 demons went down the mountain to gain experience. In the end, they were unlucky and encountered the bandits of the Hong gang. Among the group of 10,000 demons, the leader of the early-stage tribulation-passing elder has the highest cultivation. Naturally, he has to defend against the enemy. However, two experts of the same level as him jumped out of the Hong gang and quickly captured the elder. As for the other new disciples, how could they be a match for the experienced bandits of the Hong gang? Except for a few who were slaughtered, basically all of them were captured alive and had their dantian sealed. Just when they were searching these captives, there was a female disciple of the 10,000 demons who refused to be searched, fearing that her innocence would be tarnished. However, who has ever seen a bandit who has tender and protective feelings for the fairer sex? The bandits of the Hong gang are no exception. In the end, they used too much force and tore the female disciple's clothes. That really exposed her fragrant shoulder. At this moment, the leader of the Hong gang suddenly shouted, "Stop!" He strode in front of the crying female disciple, pointed at the tattoo on her shoulder and asked, "Do you know Yu Qianshou?" It turns out that on the female disciple's shoulder, the three words Yu Qianshou were tattooed. It seems that there was also some design. The tattoo is very delicate. "I don't know him." The female disciple replied in fear, not knowing what the other party wanted to do. The bandit leader felt strange and asked, "Since you don't know Yu Qianshou, why did you tattoo the three words Yu Qianshou on your shoulder?" The female disciple replied with fear, "Because this junior greatly admires Senior Yu Qianshou, and at the same time hopes to borrow the auspiciousness of Senior Yu's name to let Junior be worry-free." The bandit leader said suspiciously, "Just because of this? You tattooed Yu Qianshou's name on your shoulder?" He couldn't understand how could a girl casually tattoo a strange man's name on her body. He even suspected that he had kidnapped Yu Qianshou's old lover. Yes, the female disciple replied. "Don't ever lie to me, hee. Otherwise your end will be very miserable." The bandit leader's face was ferocious as he threatened, "Tell me honestly, what is your relationship with Yu Qianshou?" Just as the female disciple was trembling in fear, a male disciple who had already been searched by the side couldn't stand it anymore and couldn't help but roar, "Hong gang bandits, what's the point of bullying women? If you have the guts, come at me. I also have the three words Yu Qianshou tattooed on my body." With a swish, he tore off his sleeve. The three words Yu Qianshou really were tattooed on his arm. "You still dare to be so stubborn?" Bam! One of the bandits guarding immediately knocked him down with a punch. "Stop." The bandit leader stopped his subordinates from attacking again, pulled the fallen male disciple up, directly spat on his palm, and then rubbed the tattoo on the male disciple's arm. Seeing that the color didn't fade, he let go of him and muttered, "It really is a tattoo." The male disciple who was beaten gritted his teeth. A bunch of bandits who hide their heads and tails. If Senior Yu Qianshou was still here, how could your Hong gang and Qing gang be so arrogant in the cultivation world? Just wait and see. Sooner or later, Senior Yu will return with his hundreds of wandering cultivators. With Senior Yu's abhorrence of evil, when that time comes, it will be your time to die. The bandit leader was stunned by his words, and then his eyes became a little unfocused, not knowing what he was thinking. That's right. Right at this moment, another disciple stood out and tore off the clothes on his chest. The words Yu Qianshou were impressively tattooed on his chest. He opened his shirt and shouted with righteous indignation, "A bunch of shameless bandits, if you want to kill me then kill me. Senior Yu will come back to deal with you sooner or later. If you want to kill me then kill me." Swoosh swoosh. Another 5 or 6 sleeves were torn off, and a few more people stood up, with the three words Yu Qianshou tattooed on their bare arms. The group of bandits was dumbfounded. They had seen people who were not afraid of death, but they had never seen so many. Could it be that the Yu Qianshou tattoo could make them more courageous? Even the elder of the 10,000 demons who was restrained was shocked, as if he didn't expect that there would be so many disciples in the sect with the three words Yu Qianshou tattooed. The bandit leader stood there scratching his head for a while, and asked in surprise, "Aren't you from the 10,000 demons? Why are you all related to Yu Qianshou?" The bare-chested disciple stepped forward in a righteous manner, approaching step by step, and said, "Because Senior Yu is upright and plain-spoken, helps the weak, gets rid of the violent, and punishes the wicked. He specializes in killing evil people like you, and we all admire him. Senior Yu's name is not something that a lowly person like you can mention. Don't tarnish Senior Yu's name. Just you wait." Senior Yu will come back to deal with you sooner or later. The bandit leader could have easily taken care of him, but he was forced to take a step back by the Senior Yu and Senior Yu. The expression on his face was extremely complicated. When the group of hot-blooded newcomers saw that Senior Yu's big name could actually scare the bandit leader, they were instantly fired up. All of them flashed the Yu Qianqiu tattoo and approached, shouting nonsense like, "Kill me if you want to kill me." Chapter 561. Courting Death. A group of Honggang bandits were angry. They had never seen such an arrogant captive. They rushed up and beat him up. The group of hot-blooded newcomers screamed and lay on the ground, unable to get up. After the thoughtful bandit leader reacted, he waved his hand and shouted, "Stop, don't fight." Then he said to the people around him, "Return all the things they stole to them and let them go." The group of bandits thought they heard wrong. Not to mention them, even the people of 10,000 demons thought they heard wrong. "Didn't you hear?" The bandit leader's voice carried a bit of unquestionable sharpness. Although the bandits were full of doubts, they did not dare to hesitate and immediately returned all the things they stole. The bandit leader cupped his hands at the group of confused disciples of 10,000 demons and said, "I'm sorry for offending you. I didn't know that you were Yu Qianqiu's followers. I'm really sorry. Speaking of which, our Honggang is also a loose cultivator. Yu Qianqiu was also the leader elected by us loose cultivators. He led the seniors among the loose cultivators to become famous all over the world. Although we don't know where he is now, he is still worthy of our respect. Based on the 3 words Yu Qianqiu tattooed on your body, our Honggang will make an exception to give you Qianqiu face and let you go." After saying that, the bandit leader disappeared with a group of people. The remaining group of disciples of 10,000 demons looked at each other. No one thought that they would escape because of the 3 words Yu Qianqiu tattooed on their body. When everyone reacted, those admirers of Yu Qianqiu were even more excited. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu's influence to be so great. He was too powerful. Just his name alone made the Honggang retreat. It didn't take long for this matter to spread throughout the Chinese cultivation world. After that, when someone encountered the Qing gang robbing them again, they tried to flash out the tattoo of Yu Qianqiu. In the end, they discovered that the 3 words Yu Qianqiu could not only deter the Honggang, but even the Qing gang had to give face and let them pass. This was not just a one-time occurrence. After that, many people were robbed by these 2 gangs, and most of them were spared when they flashed their Yu Qianqiu tattoos. At the very least, the other party would only rob him and not kill him for the sake of Yu Qianqiu. Therefore many people, regardless of whether they admired Yu Qianqiu or not, had written the same words on their clothes. It was better to be prepared than not. At the very least, he would be able to save his life at the critical moment. Why not? For a time, the 3 words Yu Qianqiu were all the rage in the cultivation world. The ones who were the happiest when they heard the news were none other than the admirers of Yu Qianqiu, who said that Senior Yu didn't have any influence in the cultivation world. Didn't they see the Honggang and Qing gang, who didn't even give face to the big sects? Just seeing the name Yu Qianqiu, they had to be respectful? It was originally a thing of spiritual belief, and with the facts in front of them as proof, it made those who admired Yu Qianqiu even more fanatical. There were even people who went down the mountain to do things and others told him to be careful, but he patted his chest and said, "Don't be afraid, I have Senior Yu to protect me." But the result of this was that the big sect's higher-ups were very unhappy. As a disciple of their own sect, they didn't worship their own masters and seniors, but instead worshipped the notorious scum of the cultivation world, Yu Qianqiu. What kind of logic was that? To put it bluntly, if the matter was blown out of proportion, there was the danger of the sect being overturned. As a result, when this craze of worship had just started, it was greatly suppressed by the big sections. And with a typical severe punishment method, they issued a stern warning. Their own sect's disciples were strictly forbidden from mentioning Yu Qianqiu, or else they would be severely punished. The various sects' higher-ups, as well as those who had a bit of status and connections, had a stable future, naturally felt that this was the right thing to do. But in the various sects, those who had no status or connections were the majority, even though their cultivation was not that high. Under such high pressure, even the basic freedom of speech was lost. In the eyes of the majority who felt that they were being oppressed, it could only mean that the higher-ups were afraid of Yu Qianqiu, or else why were they not allowed to talk about Yu Qianqiu? The more they felt that they were being oppressed, the more unbalanced they felt in their hearts. In a place that was as misty as a fairyland, they felt that the whole world was dark, their future was dark, and they even felt that there was no future. And that Yu Qianqiu, who rose to power by resisting the strong, was like a bright light in the darkness, a revolutionary spark, pointing out the direction for everyone to move forward. The darker it was, the brighter that bright light shone. But the suppression of the various sects was effective, at least on the surface. No one could hear anyone mentioning Yuchensho anymore. But in the sects of the cultivation world, it was very normal for disciples with a bit of power and connections to bully newcomers. As a result, some hot-headed people lost their minds and jumped up to resist. But they did not have Yuchensho's ability. No matter how high they jumped, they would still be easily slapped down. They could only swallow their anger and accept reality, blaming themselves for not being Yuchensho. Such a budding movement could not cause much of a stir in the various sects, but such a thorn would more or less cause some headaches. It just so happened that the sects sent spies to the various countries to gather information. Such a dangerous task naturally fell on those disciples who repeatedly offended their superiors. As the saying goes, good karma begets good results. It had to be said that Yuchensho deliberately treated the younger disciples of the various sects well back then, not in vain. Although his actions at that time had offended the higher-ups of many sects, it had won him an extremely good reputation among the most vulnerable people in the various sections. At that time, Ziyi, who followed Yuchensho, saw that Yuchensho seemed to have changed into a different person. Not sparing any time to interact amiably with the younger disciples, she asked Yuchensho in confusion, "You always say that you are very busy, but I see that you are very willing to spend time on these things. You big liar." "What do you know?" Yuchensho rolled his eyes on the spot. "This is called looking at the future. You won't understand even if I tell you." It was precisely because of this cause and effect. When those disciples who were sent to the various countries learned that Yuchensho was wreaking havoc here, they did not ask whether he was right or wrong. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, they all described Yuchensho as a hero who fought for China's cultivation world. When the Chinese cultivation world received such news, the situation could be imagined. As a result, this name that had almost disappeared in the Chinese cultivation world once again rang out. These spies who were sent here only paid attention to other news in passing, and mainly focused on the news about Yuchensho. As a result, a large amount of news was sent back, and most of it was about Yuchensho. The image of a lone hero was more and more plentiful in front of the Chinese cultivation world. Lonely, tragic, fighting for the Chinese cultivation world with his life on the line. At the most tragic time, thousands of foreign cultivators chased him for thousands of miles, and Yuchensho fought desperately in a desperate situation. No matter how difficult the conditions were, he still fought tenaciously. The scene of blood staining thousands of miles was really tragic. Many people couldn't help but shed silent tears after the news was sent back with their own subjective imagination. Who could still say that such a person was the scum of the cultivation world? Although they were touched, for the higher-ups of the various sects, their own interests and the interests of their sects were still the most important. Who would do something like sending people to help Yuchensho? However, when they learned that Wen Lanfeng, the second-ranked expert at the late stage of soul formation in the world, was optimistic about Yuchensho and supported Yuchensho, the various sects became active again. The thoughts of the various sects became active again. They all ordered their spies to find a way to contact Yuchensho. They were willing to offer him a good position in their sects and invite him back. However, now that Yuchensho was rarely seen, who could find him? In the main hall of the plum garden, Nyeshing came again. "How is it? What did your master say?" Yuchensho asked, leaning on the chair. Nyeshing, who was standing opposite him, replied readily, "My master has already agreed to Senior's request." Yuchensho's eyes suddenly lit up. He stood up and asked, "Did you bring the money?" He looked at Nyeshing's storage bag. Nyeshing despised him from the bottom of his heart, but there was no abnormality on his face. He still said respectfully, 200 million upper-grade spirit stones is not a small amount. My master is mobilizing it from the branch and asked me to invite Senior Nyo. You want me to go to your branch to get the money? Yes, when the time comes, my master will accompany Senior to the headquarters. Yuchensho's eyes narrowed slightly. Asking Sikongju to personally accompany him to the cornucopia was naturally because he was afraid that he would run away after taking the money. He didn't expose him and said with a smile, "You go back first. We're going to be a family soon, there's no need to make it so troublesome. I have something to deal with and will go to the branch later." Nyeshing slightly paused and said hesitantly, "Since it won't take long, I'll wait for Senior outside." It wasn't that he was looking for trouble, but that Nyo Yid was too important. The limit-breaking pill was indeed of great importance. It must have already made the various powers restless. No one would want Nyo Yid to fall into the hands of world commerce. For example, world commerce's original plan. If they couldn't get Nyoye to join world commerce, then they would rather destroy him than let the limit-breaking pill fall into the hands of others. As long as Nyoye left the ghost manor, without the one-armed old man's suppression, all sorts of evil spirits would come to cause trouble. All right. Nieshing bowed and retreated as soon as Yu Qianqiu agreed. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were a little excited. They didn't know Boss's identity before, but now they could finally go out and see the big scene with Boss. Yu Qianqiu swept a glance at the two and asked indifferently, "That Yi Cheng, how's your investigation?" Fu Chunhui reported, "I've asked some people indirectly but no one knows his background. But I found out that he likes to inquire about all sorts of news, making people wonder if he's a spy sent by someone. But then again, it's not a big deal that there's a lot of people inquiring about information here. Boss, did you discover something?" "Spy." Yu Qianqiu muttered and pondered for a while. His somewhat puzzled gaze became clear and he nodded slightly, seeming to understand something. After his brows relaxed, he stared at the two for a while before saying with a slight smile, "You followed me for a while. After I leave you have to be more careful." Chapter 562. He originally wanted to kill the two of them, but they had followed him for a while and they didn't know the real secret. Take them away. This trip wouldn't be so peaceful. Bringing them along would be harming them. In the end he decided to part ways with them. Hearing his words, the two of them immediately became nervous. Qin Jiaxing nervously said, "Boss, aren't you going to take us with you?" Fu Chun also asked with a pale face, "Boss, did we do something wrong?" You've done very well. Don't think too much, it's not what you think." Yu Qianqiu strolled around the hall. "This trip will be rough and I'm sure many people won't be willing to be lonely. With your cultivation, it's not suitable for you to follow. It's safer to stay here for now. Once I've established myself in the World Commerce Association, I'll naturally contact you." These words were perfunctory. Once they made a fortune in the World Commerce Association, they wouldn't use the identity of Nyoye anymore. It was hard to say if they could contact him or not. When the two of them heard that he would find them again, their expressions became better. But because they had offended too many people recently, they were a bit scared when they thought about breaking up with him. "Boss, take us with you. No matter how dangerous it is, we're not afraid," Qin Jiaxing impatiently said. Yu Qianqiu paused and turned around. After looking at the two of them for a while, he indifferently said, "I originally wanted to send you to a safe place, but after thinking about it, I've decided to let you develop on your own. That's because I feel that it's impossible for me to take every single person I meet as my own. That would be too selfish. Boss, we followed you willingly." "You're not being selfish?" Before Fu Chun could finish, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted her. "I've already laid the foundation for you. Since you're in the cultivation world, danger is unavoidable. Don't cower and face it bravely. Strive to carve out a future that belongs to you." He said with a faint smile, "Who knows, I might need your help in the future." The two of them slightly lowered their heads. It was clear that their boss had already made his decision. Saying anything else was useless and they could only accept reality. "After I leave, don't leave Ghost Manor for now. For now it's still safe to stay here. After a while, the attention I had attracted here would fade away as I left. You should take this opportunity to plan your future path. Believe me, when you face it bravely, things won't be as bad as you think. There will always be a solution." Yu Qianqiu sincerely warned. "Understood," the two of them replied in a low voice. They seemed to be in low spirits. Yu Qianqiu opened his mouth and wanted to say some comforting words, but he felt that it was unnecessary. If they couldn't even bear such a separation, what future could they have? Thus he resolutely turned around and walked out of the hall. "Boss!" Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing shouted from behind. Yu Qianqiu didn't even turn his head. He strode to the stairs and soared into the air. Just as Zhang Xian was trying to determine his direction, a figure suddenly appeared. It was Nieshing. "Senior Ox, can we go now?" Nieshing cupped his hands. Many people in Ghost Manor raised their heads to look at the two people in the air. Even the one-armed elder was the same. Yu Qianqiu smiled and cupped his hands at the one-armed elder. During this period of time he used the elder's territory to make some money, so he naturally had to thank him. The one-armed elder didn't appreciate it and went back to his work. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing in the plum garden, then turned around and said, "Let's go." With that, he took out a flying sword from his storage bag, threw it under his feet and stepped on it. Nieshing was stunned and asked in confusion, "Senior, what are you doing?" Yu Qianqiu nonchalantly pointed around and said, The scenery is pretty good, why are you flying so fast? Don't rush, walk slowly. Niesheng was speechless. Only a ghost would believe that. He could tell that Niu Yid still wanted to hide his cultivation. Little did he know that everyone suspected that he was a soul formation expert. Even if he wasn't a soul formation expert, he was acting a bit too much. Just now, so many people had already seen him flying in the air. Wasn't it a bit too late to take out a flying sword now? How could he know what Yu Qianqiu was thinking? He knew that everyone suspected that he was a soul formation expert, but he wasn't. Thus, he decided to fake it even more, making it seem like his cultivation was below the tribulation passing stage, letting everyone slowly guess. The more people didn't know about him, the more they would have misgivings. The moment the two moved, Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes and looked around. He saw tens of people rising into the air 1,000 meters away. With the two of them as the center, they formed a circle and flew together. Seeing that he was on guard, Niesheng explained, "Senior, don't misunderstand. We're all on the same side. It's just that everyone has sent out a lot of people recently. I don't know what their intentions are. My master is afraid that someone will offend Senior, so he specially transferred some people from the headquarters to protect Senior." Sikongju has really put in a lot of effort. Yu Qianqiu smiled. "It's my duty," Niesheng said politely. Then he rubbed his lips and let out a whistle. The 30 people 1,000 meters away quickly approached them. When they were about 100 meters away from the two of them, they stopped. Looking at how these people were flying while being vigilant of their surroundings, they really did look like they were protecting someone. Yu Qianqiu didn't care at first, but then he frowned and felt that something was wrong. These 30 people were all at the early stage of the tribulation passing stage. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head slightly to look at the expressionless Niesheng and muttered to himself, "An expert in the late stage of the tribulation passing stage and an expert in the soul formation stage like me need to be protected by number 30? Isn't this unnecessary? Could it be that I'm too suspicious and overthinking things?" Yu Qianqiu secretly raised his guard, his eyes faintly observing the surroundings. Suddenly his pupils shrank. In front of him was a vast forest that was rare even in the Golden Mountain country. Who cared if it was rare or not? Yu Qianqiu couldn't be bothered with it. However, in the depths of the forest, a group of birds suddenly flapped their wings and flew away. They seemed to have been startled by something. "What's there?" Yu Qianqiu's gaze quickly shifted to Niesheng. He had clearly noticed it as well, but his lips only moved slightly. He didn't think much of it and instead glanced over. In the end, their gazes met. The two of them smiled and didn't say anything. Both of them had ulterior motives as they turned around as if nothing had happened. However, the 30 guards weren't just for show. They had clearly also noticed that something was wrong. The leader gestured forward, and 4 people immediately flew forward to investigate the dense forest in front of them. Yu Qianqiu looked back and could still see the ghost village at the edge of the forest. Thus he deliberately slowed down. If there was anything he couldn't handle, he would immediately turn back. With that one-armed old man around, it would be safer. If it really didn't work, he would consider flashing back to Utopia. Just as the 4 guards flashed into the forest that had been startled by the birds, they suddenly saw a few balls of light light up in the forest. Then they heard a few violent bangs followed by a few screams. The trees there fell and then 6 black shadows flashed into the sky. 6 masked men in black robes flew over with a whistling sound. "There's an ambush," the leader of the guards shouted loudly. The remaining 20 people quickly rushed to the front and formed a triangular formation to block the front. Niesheng also flashed over and shouted angrily, "The World Chamber of Commerce is doing business. Whoever dares to cause trouble, state your name." His voice rolled towards the incoming people. The 6 masked men in black didn't reply at all and directly rushed over. Both sides instantly engaged in a chaotic battle. For a moment, loud noises shook the heavens. It was a battle of life and death. Yu Qianqiu stood upright in the air on his sword. His eyes narrowed into slits as he realized that the 6 masked men in black were all experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Niesheng really did have some ability. He was actually able to fight 2 opponents by himself. As for the remaining 20 people, they were in a miserable state. How could they be a match for 4 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage? In just a few rounds, there were already screams and 5 or 6 people falling from the sky. In the ghost manner, a group of loose cultivators saw that Niu Yid had left and were discussing when they suddenly heard the sounds of intense fighting coming from the back of the mountain. From the sounds, it wasn't a fight between ordinary cultivators but experts. "It seems to be the direction that Senior Niu left in," someone said in surprise. "Let's go and take a look." The group of people flew up on their swords and flew towards the back of the mountain. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing looked at each other and also quickly flew over. The manor instantly became quiet. The one-armed old man who was pruning listened for a while and then continued with his work. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. Don't say that these 6 masked men were hiding here to ambush Nie Sheng's group. It seemed that other than the people at the World Chamber of Commerce, even Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing weren't sure that I left the Ghost Manor today. And they just happened to be lying in ambush along the way. What are they trying to do? Playing a trick of self-injury? Just as he thought of Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing, he heard 2 people shouting from behind him, "Boss!" Yu Qianqiu looked back and saw 2 people flying over first. Behind them was a large group of loose cultivators who flew over to watch the show. "What are you doing here? Hurry up and go back." Yu Qianqiu's expression changed as he scolded. These 6 masked men at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage were obviously coming for him. Weren't these 2 people courting death by coming over now? He knew his own abilities. He had the ability to deal with this kind of situation, but it would be difficult for him to save people. The 2 of them stopped a dozen meters away and looked at the intense fight in front of them with apprehensive expressions. Fu Chun said embarrassedly, "We heard the sounds of fighting and rushed over to take a look. We didn't expect you to be here, boss." "Get lost." Yu Qianqiu was furious. However, just as he finished cursing, he heard a few whistling sounds coming from behind him. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing cried out in unison, "Boss, be careful." The 2 of them quickly flashed over and swept past Yu Qianqiu's left and right sides. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and saw 2 masked men rushing over. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing, these 2 unknown people, didn't hesitate to release their flying swords to block for him. Chapter 563. You're no match for them, go back. Yu Qianqiu's angry roar came to an abrupt end, but it was too late. As soon as the 2 fellows' flying swords shot out, the 2 masked men raised their swords and slashed out 2 sharp sword qis. Not only did the sword qis have an astonishing momentum, but it also directly cut the 2 flying swords into 2 pieces. At this time the 2 fellows finally reacted. The opponent's cultivation level was much higher than theirs. In addition, the 2 of them were only at the early stage of tribulation passing and didn't have the strength to match it. The opponent was not someone they could fight against. Perhaps Qin Jiaxing had never encountered such a powerful opponent before, and he was somewhat stunned. He could only watch helplessly as the other party sent another sword beam at him. His entire body was cut in half by the sword beam head-on. Like a watermelon that had been cut open by a knife, red juice splattered everywhere, and the scene was too horrible to look at. Fu Chun's reaction was slightly faster. She turned around and suddenly felt a chill on her waist. She looked down and saw a bright white sword qi cut out from her abdomen, followed by a spray of blood. She watched as her upper and lower body separated and fell into the dense forest below. The moment before her upper body fell, Fu Chun looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror. There was a trace of doubt in her eyes. Why didn't boss save them with such a high cultivation level? Yu Qianqiu also wanted to save them. The black flame flying sword had already appeared in his sleeve. He was forced to use the black flame flying sword that could expose his identity. How could he say that he didn't want to save them? However, it was too fast. He didn't have time to make a move at a distance of nearly 100 meters. The outcome of the battle had already been decided. Even if the 2 of them could resist for a few more seconds, it would be enough. Unfortunately, the difference in cultivation level was one of the reasons. The key was that the 2 of them had never faced such an expert before. The moment the opponent attacked, the 2 of them were already scared stiff. At this time, Yu Qianqiu only hated the fact that he wasn't a real soul formation expert. Even a late-stage tribulation passing expert would be fine. As long as he could teleport, he hated himself for not giving the 2 of them better flying swords. At least they would be able to resist a little. Nie Sheng, who was fighting fiercely against the 2 masked men, had actually been observing them. Yu Qianqiu's suspicions were not wrong. This was indeed a trap. However, it could not be said to be a trap. It was just a test by Sikongju. Although it was rumored that Niu Yud was a spirit-severing expert, Guan Zhongkai was quite sure of it. Sikongju also believed that Niu Yud was a spirit-severing expert. However, Yin Baikong had always been suspicious. A spirit-severing Niu Yud? With his experience in the cultivation world, how could he not have heard of it? After receiving Niu Yud's portrait, he realized that he had never seen him before. Yin Baikong found it strange. How could a spirit-severing cultivator not show his face in the cultivation world? If he were to say that he was ignorant, then fine. Bai Changchun is the most senior person in the cultivation world, right? However, during Bai Changchun's appointment at the East Sea, all the masters of the soul formation stage had gathered, except for Wen Lanfeng, but none of them had seen this person. Could it be that Bai Changchun doesn't know this person? After Yin Baikong and Sikong Ju contacted each other, the latter also felt that his master's words made sense. In the end, Yin Baikong ordered, "Rumors may not be trustworthy. Think of a way to test this Niu Yid's depth and see if he is a spirit-severing expert. This will make it easier for us to make a decision in the future." Yin Baikong's plan could not be said to be bad. If he was really a spirit-severing expert, it would be worth it to invite him to join the World Commerce Association. If he wasn't, then I won't be polite. I'll use this chance to directly capture him. I don't even need to give him a single spirit stone. Moreover, I'll make him spit out what he swallowed in the past. As for the limit-breaking pill, as long as Niu Yid is in my hands, I don't have to worry about not being able to pry his mouth open. Even if I can't pry his mouth open, at least the item won't fall into other people's hands. Sikong Ju deeply agreed and immediately planned this scene. The 30 early-stage tribulation passing guards actually didn't know anything and were truly doing their duty. The 6 late-stage tribulation passing masked men, including Nye Sheng, were all Sikong Ju's direct disciples. As the main characters, the 7 of them naturally knew the plot. However, plans couldn't keep up with changes. Who would have known that the 6 disciples lying in ambush would alarm a flock of birds? In reality, although Sikong Ju was prepared to sacrifice some of these 30 guards, he didn't plan to let them pay such a huge price and cause them to be completely wiped out. The World Commerce Association's influence was not bad, but nurturing 30 early-stage tribulation passing experts was not an easy task. After all, it required time to accumulate. The original plan was for Nye Sheng to bring Niu Yid to the sky above the ambush location and the people below would suddenly attack Niu Yid and Nye Sheng. If Niu Yid was really very powerful, Nye Sheng would pretend to be injured to delay him. The attackers would quickly break out of the encirclement and in the process, they would kill a few guards to wash away the suspicion on the World Commerce Association. On the other hand, if the rumors were wrong and Niu Yid wasn't much, they would definitely reveal their ferociousness and capture him. The 30 guards would naturally be fine. Who knew that there would be such a big mistake? Nye Sheng and his martial brothers, who were pretending to fight vigorously, secretly complained. The remaining guards, on the other hand, were in a killing frenzy and fought with their lives on the line. Little did they know that if they hadn't secretly let them go, they would have been finished long ago. As a last resort, in order to complete their master's arrangements, 2 of them decided to take the risk. That was why Fu Chan and Qin Jiaxing were killed. However, it was this scene that made Nye Sheng and the others suspicious. Hearing Niu Yid's anxious roar, it didn't seem fake. If he really was a soul formation expert, why didn't he help them? When the group of loose cultivators saw that Fu Chan and Qin Jiaxing had been killed, they immediately turned around and ran, afraid that they would be implicated. The black fire-flying sword in Yu Qianqiu's sleeve hid back into his body. A smile appeared on his face, a smile that was abnormally sinister. After the 2 masked men killed the 2 people blocking their way, they quickly rushed over. Seeing that they were only a few dozen meters away just as they were about to attack, they saw Niu Yid clench his fists and reveal a mouth full of eerie white teeth. Ah! Yu Qianqiu spread his arms and roared with a sinister expression. His roar was filled with sorrow and helplessness. Speaking of Yu Qianqiu, he was famous in the cultivation world for being cruel and merciless. It was not an exaggeration to say that he killed without batting an eye. It didn't matter how cruel or evil others were to him. He liked this kind of people the most. He could bear all the vicious and evil tricks because he never thought of himself as a good person. However, the only thing he couldn't bear was when other people treated him well sincerely. Even if they treated him well sincerely, he would feel that it would be hard to repay them. To him, there was nothing heavier than this in this world. In his previous life he had been rolling around in dirty water. What bad things had he not done? He had long felt that he wasn't a good person. He was evil inside and out, and his heart had long become numb. However, once he met someone who treated him well sincerely, he would suddenly wake up and feel that he was still human. Therefore, he cherished this kind of relationship and carefully protected it in every possible way. He wasn't a person who fell in love easily, but why were Fu Chan and Qin Jiaxing so stupid? They usually looked like they were afraid of death, but why did they risk their lives for him at such a critical moment? You guys are too stupid. I won't feel sad for your deaths and I won't shed a tear for you. 2 fools, idiots, it's good that you died, lest I find you unpleasant in the future. Countless complaints and curses towards Qin Jiaxing and Fu Chun were all vented in this sorrowful and helpless roar. Along with the roar, a series of extreme negative emotions such as despair, desolation, indifference, and death surged out, forming a majestic aura that chilled to the bone, an abnormally terrifying aura, that kind of terrifying aura that made one's soul tremble instantly burst out in an earth-shattering manner. The aura of the black fire hidden in his body burst out in an instant. He wanted to control it, wanted to hold it back, but subconsciously chose to erupt. The area within a radius of a few miles was instantly filled with an icy and frightening aura. It was originally a sunny day, but the area within a radius of a few miles seemed to have turned into a patch of dusky gray. It was as if the netherworld had opened up a door here. All the insects, birds, and beasts within a radius of a few miles didn't even have the chance to escape. They were instantly frozen to death. The battle on the other side stopped and everyone looked over while trembling. They didn't understand what was going on. Niexing looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was roaring angrily with his arms wide open in horror. His heart sank and he subconsciously felt that his probing this time was too absurd. He had offended someone he shouldn't have. He finally experienced the kind of terror that big senior brother Guanzhongkai had described. It seemed to be even more terrifying. Who said that Niu Yid wasn't an expert of the soul formation stage? He wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. This place had basically turned into hell on earth. It was too terrifying. Within the ghost manor at the edge of the terrifying aura, a group of loose cultivators had just landed. Even though they were at the edge, those loose cultivators with mediocre cultivation levels still felt a little overwhelmed, and they flew away while trembling. The one-armed old man who was pruning suddenly raised his head and looked in that direction. The shock in his eyes was difficult to conceal. He didn't know which expert was able to emit such a terrifying aura. Could it be Bai Changchun? No, this wasn't Bai Changchun's aura. It was completely different. A loose cultivator flew past him, and his single arm grabbed onto his shoulder with lightning speed. That loose cultivator said in horror, "Senior, what are you trying to do? Speak, what's going on over there?" The one-armed old man asked for the first time. "You're not mute." That loose cultivator hurriedly corrected himself in shock. It's Senior Niu Yid who was ambushed by unknown masked people. Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing were killed. That's all I know. The one-armed old man shook him off with one hand, and directly disappeared from the ghost manor using teleportation. The two masked people who attacked Yu Qianqiu were the first to bear the brunt of this terrifying ice-cold wave. Moreover, they were at the very center of this terrifying aura. At this moment, let alone attack, the swords in their hands had already fallen out of their hands. They forcefully held on in the air, but they could hear their upper and lower teeth chattering non-stop, and their eyes were showing signs of rolling back. Chapter 564. Then, a green flying sword flew out of his sleeve and cut a flat surface on the trunk of the big tree between the two graves. The green light flashed and a few words were engraved: "Wake up from your dream." 6 heads were at the early stage of the tribulation transcendent stage, and 3 heads were at the late stage. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and looked at the one-armed old man in the air not far away. The two stared at each other for a long time. There was a flat bluestone path at the back door that led to the canyon 100 meters away. There was actually nothing in the canyon. It was just a place for cultivators to go and land. The main reason was that they were afraid that the cultivators would come and go too shockingly, scaring the mortals. In a slightly flat place in the forest he found a big tree. On both sides of the tree he slashed out 2 deep pits with his palms. Then he released 2 clouds of golden mist into the 2 pits. In the blink of an eye, 2 golden coffins appeared in the 2 pits. Was he still human? The one-armed old man asked himself. The consequences could be imagined, but he didn't dare to say anything to save them. The consequences of revealing the secret would probably anger Niu Yid. Such a terrifying person was already so powerful just from his aura. Once he started fighting, what would happen? Yu Qianqiu's gaze was unusually cold as he watched the 4 people fly away. He tilted his head slightly and slowly floated in front of another masked man. The black flames leaping in his eyes reappeared. White smoke, a broken body and another head in his hand. Yu Qianqiu walked in front of a masked man. Suddenly 2 shining black flames appeared in his eyes. The masked man's eyes completely rolled back, and the last trace of resistance he had also fainted. His entire body fell down with a whoosh. Later he found the 2 halves of Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing's corpses. The Gold Casting City Guild Hall was beside the main road in the southern suburbs of Gold Casting City. An endless stream of mules and horses shuttled in and out of the gate. It was a busy scene. All the businessmen in Gold Casting City knew that this guild hall was the largest trading place in this area. They did all kinds of business as long as they could make money. The one-armed old man's eyes flickered. On the other hand, Nie Xing's eyes were slightly protruding and red. His expression was very complicated, but the most obvious one was a trace of pain. The price he had paid to probe was too great. The large hall was surrounded by high walls, and the inside of the hall was divided into two halves by a series of buildings. One half was extremely prosperous, while the other half was not so noisy. The businessmen in the secular world did not know what the other half was like. It had not been open to the public for many years. Someone had tried to enter through the back door to take a look, but the guards at the back refused to let them in. No matter how powerful their background or connections were, they would not let them in. After that, his figure flashed and his speed increased a little. 6 balls of dense white mist were sucked into his palm, and another 6 heads were plucked off. A total of 9 hair buns were entangled in one hand. What an evil aura! The one-armed old man was startled and suddenly came to his senses. He immediately circulated his energy to his limbs and bones to expel the death chi that had invaded his body. He stopped 400 or 500 meters away in the air and looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. He simply could not imagine how a living person, a cultivator brimming with vitality, could give off such a horrifying and evil death chi. The 4 of them exchanged glances before turning around and flying away with great difficulty. The circulation of quintessence in their bodies was very slow, and their mental energy was also very weak. Hence, their flying speed was not fast. Nie Xing was startled and pretended not to understand. He asked, "Senior, what do you mean? Why do I not understand?" "Senior." Nie Xing felt that something was wrong and wanted to explain. However, he saw 2 balls of black flames burning in the other party's eyes. Boundless despair and a cold aura instantly enveloped him. He wanted to turn around and flee, but he felt that his body would not listen to him. After that, his mind went blank and he did not know what to do. The 4 masked men who were flying away would occasionally turn their heads back to look. When they saw this horrifying scene, they did not dare to turn back and flew away with all their might. He grabbed the 2 hair buns on his head with one hand and floated towards Nie Xing expressionlessly. That person's body turned into a dried corpse in the blink of an eye. However, the head that was grabbed was still intact. His shriveled body, which had shrunk to twice its original size, dangled in the loose clothes beneath his head, swaying leisurely. The scene was extremely strange. Yu Qianqiu swept a glance at them and said indifferently, "Sikongju is really ruthless. No wonder his name has the word Ju in it. It's a pity that these dozens of loyal and devoted disciples didn't even know what happened until they died." He put down his arms and the anger on his face disappeared without a trace. Yu Qianqiu's face was as calm as still water. There was not a single trace of emotion on his face. "Hurry up and leave. Don't hesitate. Leave before Niu Yid kills us. If we're late, none of us will be able to leave." Nie Xing transmitted his voice to the 4 of them and roared hysterically. However, he still had to pretend to look at them with hatred on his face. In reality, he was suspecting that with Niu Yid's terrifying cultivation, the 4 of them might not be able to escape. Little did they know that the front was a place that did business for the secular world. The back was a place that only did business for the cultivation world. It was not a place that ordinary mortals could reach. This was the World Commerce Association branch that was famous in the cultivation world. He strolled in the air and walked towards the 2 dazed masked men. His gaze towards the 2 of them was filled with a deathly stillness and emptiness, as though there was nothing there. He had never seen such a stealthy method of killing people. It was as though he was casually picking off someone's head. Especially the scene of the body turning into a dried corpse, it was a little disgusting to look at. The closer he got, the more dazed he became. His soul fire was constantly shrinking, as though it could be extinguished at any moment. The life force in his body was being stripped away bit by bit, replaced by an aura of death. Nie Xing stared at Yu Qianqiu with fear as he walked towards his 2 junior brothers who were in a deadlock in the air. What would happen to his 2 junior brothers? The moment the one-armed old man entered the sinister and terrifying area, his heart also trembled. This strange aura did not suppress the human body first. Instead, it suppressed the soul and mind that no matter how high one's cultivation was, it was difficult to resist. Gazing at the 2 golden coffins, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "I'm sorry, but this is all I can do for you. Brothers, have a safe journey." With that said, he waved his palm and the soil returned to its original position. He then patted them firmly. With a light stamp of his foot, the flying sword he was standing on flipped up and flashed into the storage bag at his waist. Nie Sheng resisted looking at the two heads in his hands. He cupped his hands and said while shivering, "Senior is mighty and killed the enemy in one move. Our World Commerce Association will definitely work together to capture those who escaped. We won't let them escape. Senior, could you restrain your aura a little? I really can't hold on much longer." Yu Qianqiu grabbed his head and watched coldly as the corpse turned into dust. He carried the two separated corpses and put them neatly together in the two golden coffins. Then, the golden mist rose again and sealed the two golden coffins tightly. It was so seamless that not even a crack could be found. There were protruding lines on the front of the golden coffins. They were Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing. "Remember to tell them the truth when you go down, lest they die with everlasting regret," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. He didn't dare to go any closer. The closer he got, the more he found that even his strong willpower was gradually wavering. Not long after he left, the one-armed old man rushed into the forest and landed. He looked around and his gaze fell on the two new piles of soil. He slowly walked over and looked up at the words on the tree trunk thoughtfully. He didn't know what he was trying to express. The blue flying sword flew back into his sleeve. Yu Qianqiu's expression was cold. He didn't look back anymore and resolutely turned around. He walked to a nearby place, picked up the 9 heads with one hand and flew out of the dense forest. Most of the cultivators who came here to trade could abide by the rule of not disturbing the world. This was also a rule that everyone in the cultivation world followed. Whether they came or left, everyone would come and go through this guarded canyon. Yu Qianqiu slightly shook his arm, and with a whoosh the dried corpse turned into dust that scattered into the forest below. A complete head was in his hand. He absolutely couldn't let such a terrifying expert become the World Commerce Association's opponent. Nie Sheng instantly made the decision to abandon his 2 juniors. He turned around and sent a voice transmission to the remaining 4 juniors with difficulty. "Go. You guys go quickly. This Niu Yud's cultivation is probably several levels higher than Master's. He's not someone we can deal with. Quickly go back and tell Master the news so that Master can prepare." Failure, pain and sorrow took turns to strike at his heart. A wasted life made one sigh with emotion and feel powerless. His entire being gradually sank into a kind of despair, becoming more and more desperate. It was as if there was a voice calling out to him, telling him to let go of all his burdens and close his eyes to follow it. It was like the call of the Grim Reaper from the Netherworld. Not feeling the other party's hostility, Yu Qianqiu flew towards the forest below. After he landed, he threw the 9 heads with their hair tangled together on the ground. Then he flew around the forest again. The 4 masked men looked at the other 2 with a gaze that clearly asked, what should they do? There were only 6 guards left out of the 30. Because their cultivation wasn't high, they had already entered a semi-conscious state and were slowly becoming shorter. A hand just happened to reach out and grab the person's hair bun. The masked man emitted a cloud of white smoke with a whoosh, and entered the hand that grabbed the person's hair bun. In the canyon, a few people left and a few people landed. It was originally a place where they wouldn't disturb each other. But at this moment it caused a commotion. Those who wanted to leave stopped and looked at the person who had just landed on his sword. There was nothing special about this person, but the thing in his hand was relatively special: 9 heads with disheveled hair. In a daze, he thought back to the past and felt like he had never experienced anything worth being happy about in his life. But he knew that he clearly had, but he just couldn't remember it. The only thing he could remember was failure after failure, as well as every pain and sorrow. The sad past that he didn't want to remember appeared so clearly in his mind as if it had just happened. Chapter 565. The few of them looked over and saw a person carrying a pile of items on the bluestone road outside. Behind him was a large group of people, aggressively pressing over. No matter how they looked at it, it seemed like they were here to cause trouble. Damn it. Did this person come to the World Commerce Association to find trouble? Below, Sikongju, whose hair was slightly white, stood in the hall with his hands behind his back. The 4 disciples, Hu Tianbao, Zhang Zuanxing, Yang Rong, and Weng Luhui, were lying on their chairs with pale faces as they recounted the ambush on Niu Yud. Especially when they talked about the scene where Niu Yud showed his might, the 4 of them couldn't help but shiver. Under the continuous eaves of the World Commerce Association's gold casting city branch was a row of shops. They were all World Commerce's shops. There was definitely no other shop here. Even so, there was a wide variety of goods in the different categories of shops. That person couldn't see through his cultivation, Plus Yu Qianqiu called him a junior and knew Nie Xing. Not daring to pursue the matter further, he immediately soared into the sky and went to report in advance. I'm worried that Niu Yud has already seen through it. Then your second senior brother and the rest have probably already met with. Sikongju shook his head slightly and didn't say the word, met with misfortune. A few cultivators were chatting in the spacious area when one of them unintentionally glanced outside and said blankly, "What are those people doing?" Yu Qianqiu raised the heads in his hand and said, "Before coming, Nie Xing told me that he could exchange these 9 heads for 100 million high-grade spirit stones from Sikongju. I don't know if it's true or not." "That's right, Nie Xing is from your World Commerce Association, right?" A quick-witted person pulled the others and said in a low voice, "Let's get out of the way. Don't block the way, it's none of our business." The few of them looked at Sikongju and then at the approaching people and immediately came to a realization. "You don't need to feel uneasy." Sikongju sighed and said, "From what you've said, that Niu Yud's cultivation isn't just a level higher than mine. Aura is the remnant power of cultivation. To be able to emit such a terrifying aura, I'm afraid that his cultivation isn't any weaker than your grandmaster's. Looks like your eldest senior brother's words that day weren't made up to absolve himself from responsibility. I can only blame my poor judgment for harming 8th and 9th brother. I'm worried." The 10 disciples he had painstakingly trained had always been his right-hand men in handling the affairs of the World Chamber of Commerce. In order to complete the task assigned to him by his master Yin Baikong, and in addition to the importance of the limit-breaking pill, he had brought all 10 of his strongest disciples with him. He did not expect that 2 of them would be gone in the blink of an eye. How could he not be heartbroken? There was one more that worried him. The 4 of them looked at each other. Hu Tianbao asked, "Master, what are you worried about?" "That's right." That person was also sizing up Yu Qianqiu. When he realized that he couldn't see through his cultivation, his tone became slightly more polite. "I'm not sure either. In short, it's a bunch of bastards." Yu Qianqiu looked at the things in his hands and said indifferently, "These guys ambushed Niu Yud and Nie Xing outside the Ghost Manor. Don't you think they deserve to die?" Whispers rang out in the valley. Someone actually brought 9 heads here. It seemed like he was trying to ruin the World Chamber of Commerce's business. What surprised everyone even more was that the scene in front of them showed that the dignified soul formation expert, the number 2 person of the World Chamber of Commerce, Sikongju, had come to meet this person. The group of people in the valley followed behind Yu Qianqiu. Even those who were about to leave after finishing their business also returned to follow, wanting to see what would happen next. The group of people in the valley was in an uproar. The uproar was because they felt that this person was extremely arrogant. Who was Sikongju? He was the head disciple of the late soul formation expert Yin Baikong. He himself was also an early soul formation expert and was the number 2 person of the World Chamber of Commerce. It was difficult for normal cultivators to meet such a person in the cultivation world. To let Sikongju know who he was without announcing his name, his background was probably not simple. This person was Sikongju's 3rd disciple, Mu Lianqiu. He gestured to his 4 junior brothers, indicating that there was no need to be overly courteous. He then walked to his master with a frown and cupped his hands, saying, "Master, I received a report from a disciple in the valley. Someone brought 9 heads to find you. He said that senior brother Nye asked him to bring them to you to exchange for a reward. He also said that you would know who he was after talking to him." Sikongju waved his hand and released a gentle force that pressed him back to his original position. He said, "Your body hasn't recovered yet. Sit and talk." That person's expression turned solemn. He had seen Ye Xing bring a group of people to the Ghost Manor early in the morning. He didn't expect that they would be ambushed. He immediately cupped his hands and said, "I wonder if you can tell me your name so that I can report it." The person who came was actually familiar with Second Martial Uncle, so he naturally had to treat him seriously. "It should be Niu Yud." Sikongju turned to look at Mu Lianqiu with a sinister expression. "Where is he?" Even if they didn't know this person, they could guess who he was from how everyone addressed him. He was the famous soul formation expert of the World Commerce Association, Sikongju. What made them nervous was why was he staring at them? "I hope so." Just as Sikongju let out a long sigh, they heard hurried footsteps coming from outside. When a middle-aged man came in, Hu Tianbao and the other 3 shouted, "Third Martial Brother." "He's reported to be walking over from the valley," Mu Lianqiu replied. As he spoke, he kept sizing up the 9 heads in the man's hand. Unfortunately, their faces were covered by messy hair. 2 of their faces were even covered by black cloth, so they couldn't see their faces clearly. He couldn't help but ask, Whose heads are these 9 heads? Sikongju could easily see the deep fear in his disciple's eyes. He pondered and said, so that means that Nyo Yud's cultivation has indeed reached the soul formation stage? That's right. With our strength, it's not worth the soul formation expert to look at us for so long. The few of them hurriedly moved to the sides. As long as you could afford it, you could buy almost anything here other than rare items that were hard to find in the world. Even if you didn't have something for the time being, as long as you paid a deposit, the goods could be transferred very quickly. There weren't many people here, but there were at least 100 cultivators wandering around. There were customers in front of the row of shops. In the middle of the shop was a large open door. There were people guarding it and no one was allowed to enter or leave. Master, forgive disciple for speaking bluntly. Hu Tianbao, who was sitting at the head of the table, struggled to stand up and speak. This was all thanks to the powerful trading network that the World Commerce Association had set up in the cultivation world. It lived up to its reputation. At the same time, there were shops that specialized in buying things. As long as it was something worth buying or selling, it would all be bought. The World Chamber of Commerce still had many branches like this throughout the cultivation world. Master, it shouldn't be as bad as you think. Hu Tianbao analyzed. With that Nyo Yud's cultivation, he could have taken our lives effortlessly, but he didn't do so. Since he could even let us go, even if he saw some clues, he probably wouldn't make things difficult for second senior brother. Second martial uncle? That person's face was filled with respect, but when he heard this guy directly call his martial ancestor Sikongju's name, his face changed and his tone became a little stiff. That's right, second martial uncle is the manager of this branch. Yu Qianqiu looked around and his gaze fell on Sikongju. He snorted. I don't see any other soul formation cultivators here. You're the only one who barely makes it. Needless to say, you're Yin Baikong's eldest disciple. What's your name again? Actually, it would be strange if he could see through Sikongju's cultivation. But he could guess it even if he used his butt. Not to mention he had heard someone call Sikongju Senior earlier. Sikongju's heart thumped. Indeed, what he feared had come true. Hu Tianbao and the others looked at each other with pale faces. It's fine if I don't say my name. It's not something a junior like you has the right to ask. Yu Qianqiu's words were filled with arrogance. He glanced at him expressionlessly and said, Go tell Sikongju that I brought a few heads to claim my reward. He will naturally know who I am. Finishing, he carried the 9 heads and walked out of the canyon. When the spectators saw Yu Qianqiu, they were instantly dumbfounded. Speaking of killing people who hadn't done it before. But running around with heads in their hands, they really hadn't done it before. Not to mention running to the World Commerce Association with a bunch of heads. Many people looked at the dozen or so guards around the canyon. A person flashed down from the top of the canyon and landed in front of Yu Qianqiu. He said in a deep voice, The World Commerce Association welcomes friends from all over the world to do business. I wonder what does friend mean by bringing a few heads here? Thank you, Master. Hu Tianbao cupped his hands gratefully and said uneasily, Master, forgive disciple for speaking bluntly. I'm afraid Nyo Yud's cultivation is even higher than Master's. In the inner hall of the gold casting city branch, Yin Baikong's portrait hung on the wall in the middle of the hall. From this portrait he looked much more elegant than Yin Baikong himself. He had the air of an immortal. You're from the World Commerce Association? Yu Qianqiu glanced at him and found that he was the same as him. He was also in the early stage of tribulation passing. The two of them walked to the center of the hall. When they were a few meters apart, they stopped and sized each other up. Yes. Hu Tianbao and the others accepted the order and stood up to walk towards the back of the hall. Let's go and take a look first. Just as the master and disciple walked to the door, Sikongju suddenly stopped and turned his head, saying, You 4, go hide in the secret room for now. Finishing, he quickly walked away. How could a person worthy of Sikongju's personal appearance be an ordinary person? Everyone immediately whispered to each other, trying to guess this person's background. Everyone also looked at Yu Qianqiu and found that he was indeed very unfamiliar. At this moment, they heard a wave of flattery coming from behind them. Senior Sikong was being called out non-stop. Looking back, they saw 2 people standing outside the large open door in the middle of the shop. The person standing at the front had white hair and a sinister expression as he looked over. People continuously went over to pay their respects, but this person remained indifferent and didn't move at all. He just stared straight at them. On the bluestone path between the canyon and the gold casting city branch, Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly walked in front with 9 heads in his hands. A group of people followed a few meters behind him. No matter how one looked at it, it was a little strange. The moment Yu Qianqiu stepped through the gate, Sikongju walked over. He didn't dare to be careless when facing such an expert. His gaze swept across the pile of heads in Sikongju's hands and he immediately felt his chest tighten. Chapter 566. But when these words fell into other people's ears, it had a different meaning. He called Yin Baikong directly by his name and did not put Sikongju in his eyes at all. Everyone was shocked and looked at each other with questioning gazes before shaking their heads, indicating that they did not know who this person was. Mu Lianqiu could not take it anymore. Someone was looking down on his master. No matter how high the other party's cultivation was, if he did not say anything, how could he face others in the future? He took 2 steps forward and was about to scold Niu Yud, but Sikongju gently waved his hand to stop him. Sikongju sized Niu Yud up and a trace of shock appeared in his eyes. Since he could not see through Niu Yud's cultivation, his previous guess was right. Niu Yud's cultivation was indeed higher than his. Sikongju greets Mr. Niu. Sikongju greeted him politely. He wanted to call him Brother Niu, but he could not figure out Niu Yud's level, so he could only call him Mr. Mr. Niu? Everyone immediately reacted. Who else could make Sikongju treat someone with the surname Niu so politely other than Niu Yud, who dared to raise the price at the ghost village to cheat the various countries? He's the ruthless judge Niu Yud? He's the Niu Yud that the World Trade Association spent 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to invite? No wonder. The group of people discussed. He was Niu Yud himself? The people who came with Yu Qianqiu to watch the show were stunned. They recalled what Niu Yud said in the canyon and looked at the pile of heads in his hand. They could not help but wonder who was so daring to attack the ruthless judge. They were really courting death. TSK. My eyes are pretty good. You are indeed Yin Baikong's eldest disciple. Yu Qianqiu nodded. At this time, most of the group's gazes were fixed on the 9 heads, trying to identify who these people were. They actually dared to attack a soul formation cultivator. It was obvious. Someone who could make the World Trade Association spend 1 billion and who could make Sikongju personally come out to welcome them must be at the level of a soul formation expert. Mu Lianqiu looked at the 2 masked heads. His pupils constricted and his breathing became a little chaotic. His hands, which were hidden in his sleeves, involuntarily clenched into fists, his knuckles turning white. Other than sweeping a glance at the 9 heads that Yu Qianqiu was holding, Sikongju did not look at them anymore. Glancing at the gazes of the crowd looking at the 9 heads, a smile appeared on his usually sinister face. He did not mind Niu Yud's rude words as he waved his hand and said, Mr. Niu, your presence brings light to the world commerce. Please come in and speak, please. Their attitude was very courteous. The master and disciple stood on the left and right, giving way to the middle of the road. The standard of this welcome was not low. However, no matter how well he acted on the surface, no matter how much face he gave, it could not extinguish the rage Yu Qianqiu felt when he buried Fu Chun and Qin Jiaxing with his own hands. You dare to plot against me and touch my people? You better pay the price first. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart, but on the surface he was polite. However, his feet didn't move at all. He smiled and said, No hurry. Sikongju, is Niexing your disciple? The master and disciple looked at each other and tried their best to hide the gloominess in their eyes. Then Sikongju looked at the surrounding people, turned around and nodded. That's right. He is my 2nd disciple. I sent someone to receive Mr. early in the morning. Could it be that Mr. did not see him? That's good. I thought I met a swindler. Yu Qianqiu muttered and turned around with a cold expression. He looked at the surrounding cultivators and said, On the way here, I was attacked by 6 late-stage tribulation passing realm cultivators. I don't know which sect sent them. Everyone please bear witness. Spread the news for me. If I and Niu Yud find out who did it, I will twist his head off and use it as a urinal. Many people were in an uproar as they didn't expect such a thing to happen. However, when everyone thought about it, they felt that something was wrong. Wasn't it attacked by 6 late-stage tribulation passing realm cultivators? Why are you carrying 9 heads in your hands? Sikongju and Mu Lianqiu were expressionless and naturally wouldn't admit that they did it. Mu Lianqiu even shouted solemnly, There's actually such a thing? You even dare to touch our world commerce's esteemed guest. You are simply looking down on our world commerce. Lianqiu. Yes, disciple. Mu Lianqiu cupped his fists. Immediately send a message to the various chambers of commerce. Use all our resources to investigate this matter. Find the mastermind and give Mr. Niu an explanation. Yes. Mu Lianxiu quickly turned around and left. Yu Qianqiu raised half of his eyebrows as he watched the master and disciple echo each other. After Sikongju passed the order, he frowned and asked, "Mr. Niu, why didn't I see my disciple return with you? Could it be that my disciple has met with some mishap?" "It's like this," Yu Qianqiu explained. "Those 6 attacking cultivators saw that the situation wasn't right and wanted to escape. I was in a rage, so how could I let them escape? Thus, I was prepared to take action personally. Who knew that Niesheng wouldn't dare to trouble me? He said that the World Commerce would offer a huge reward for the capture and that the attacking bandits wouldn't be able to escape." Sikongju's eyebrows twitched and said, "What is this Niesheng doing? With Mr. taking action, it should be easy." Before he could finish speaking, Yu Qianqiu slapped his thigh and said, "That's right. I told Niesheng at that time that since we are going to offer a reward for the capture, why let the money fall into the hands of others? I happened to be a little tight on cash, so I did not hesitate to take action and casually killed 2 of them." The surrounding people exclaimed in surprise. He was indeed an expert to casually kill 2 late-stage tribulation transcendence cultivators. Sikongju's eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. Yu Qianqiu continued in high spirits. "After I brought the 2 heads back, I asked Niesheng how much they were worth. Niesheng said that I would be able to find out who the mastermind against the world commerce was from these 2 people and that the world commerce would definitely not mistreat me. However, I am a stubborn person and wanted him to state a price first. Otherwise, I would not give him the 2 heads. In the end, Niesheng decided that it was at least 100 million high-grade spirit stones. To be honest, I was very satisfied with this price and gave him the 2 heads immediately. 100 million high-grade spirit stones. The world commerce is indeed wealthy." The surrounding people exclaimed in surprise again. Mu Lianxiu, who had just returned, had a taut expression and did not say a word after hearing this. Sikongju already knew the truth from his 4 disciples and wished he could tear Niu Yid's mouth apart for lying through his teeth. He let out a sigh and said, "Does that mean that my disciple Niesheng is still alive?" "Sikongju, you are not a righteous person. Why do you change the topic when we talk about money?" Yu Qianqiu asked unhappily. "I only have one question for you. Does the 100 million high-grade spirit stones reward that your disciple, Niesheng, mentioned count?" This. Sikongju suppressed his anger and forced a smile. "Sir, there is no need to be anxious. 100 million high-grade spirit stones is not a small amount. When Niesheng returns, I will verify it with him. If he really said that, with the reputation of the world commerce, we will not go back on our word. Does that mean you suspect that I'm lying?" Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. "Looking at the situation, I don't expect to get the reward. Since that is the case, I will first find the mastermind who attacked me and settle the score." As he spoke, he pulled out 2 heads from the 9 in his other hand. They were the 2 masked heads. He raised them and walked around the crowd. "I rarely walk around the cultivation world and do not have a lot of experience. I will now remove these 2 people's masks. I will trouble everyone to help me identify them and see which sect they are from to actually dare to attack me. Don't worry, I never mistreat my friends who help me. If anyone can help me identify them, I will give 10 limit-breaking pills as a reward." Sikongju and Mu Lianxiu's expressions changed drastically. This guy actually played this trick. He was too extreme. 10 limit-breaking pills? The group of people immediately became excited. There were many nascent soul cultivators here. What did 10 limit-breaking pills mean? It went without saying that it meant that they could successfully step into another realm that they had been searching for. "Are you serious? Senior Niu, do you mean what you said?" Yu Qianqiu waved the 2 heads in his hand and said in a loud voice, "Even though I, Niu Yid, can't be considered to be a gentleman, I do as I say, and I never lie or deceive anyone. Senior Niu, if we recognize these 2 heads in front of everyone, we won't dare to say it in front of everyone." Someone shouted out his misgivings. "That's true." Yu Qianqiu nodded. He bent down and gently placed the head in his hand by his feet. However, he didn't let go of the 7 heads in his other hand. A hand appeared in the air and rummaged through his storage bag for a while. A large amount of bright red things appeared in front of everyone. The red mist lingered, and even under the bright sun, it couldn't cover it up. The red miasma also wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's hand. "Pill halo. It's actually pill halo. Is this the legendary pill halo that only appears on the pills refined by a top-grade pill refiner? Oh my god. It's really pill halo." Everyone's eyes lit up as they exclaimed. Mu Lianxiu looked at his master and saw his master's pupils constricting as he stared at the pill halo in Niu Yid's hand. As Yu Qianshou turned around, he held the pill halo in his hand and said, "These are limit-breaking pills. There are 20 of them, and as long as you recognize them, I'll cash them out on the spot. At the same time, I'm also worried that someone is deceiving me, so I'm willing to give the two of you a chance to check. As for what everyone is worried about, it's inevitable. It just depends on who is willing to take this gamble. I won't force it. I believe that even if no one recognizes these two heads today, someone will eventually recognize them. Everyone do as you see fit." After he finished speaking, he stuffed the limit-breaking pills into his storage bag and bent over to remove the scarves on the two heads. Suddenly someone shouted, "Wait!" It was Sikongju. Yu Qianshou sneered in his heart, but he looked at Sikongju in surprise. "What's wrong? Don't you allow people to do this here? That's easy." So he lifted the two heads and waved at everyone. "Those who want the limit-breaking pills, follow me. Let's change places." Chapter 567. "Mr. Niu, let me finish," Sikongju called out again. Yu Qianshou held 7 heads in his left hand and 2 heads in his right hand as he slowly turned around. "What do you mean?" To be honest, everyone in the cultivation world knows that Mr. Niu likes spirit stones. Before Sikongju could finish, Yu Qianshou rolled his eyes and interrupted him. "Then find a cultivator who doesn't like spirit stones for me to see." "Mister, you misunderstood me," Sikongju said solemnly. "There is one thing I know. With Mister's cultivation and character, there is no need for you to lie. Since Mister said that my disciple, Nye agreed to the 100 million bounty, then it must be true." It sounded a little self-justifying, but it was the truth. "Of course it's true." Yu Qianshou nodded sincerely and waited for him to continue. Hearing this, Sikongju's expression twitched. He really couldn't hold it in anymore, but he had to endure it. He gritted his teeth and continued, "It's still the same thing. The world commerce's reputation is the most important. Since my disciple agreed to the 100 million bounty as his master, I have to honor it." Everyone was in an uproar again. They thought that they had a chance to get 10 limit-breaking pills for free, and their blood was boiling. However, they were doused with a bucket of cold water. As long as one wasn't a fool, they could tell what Sikongju meant. He was going to take the 100 million bounty for these two heads. Mu Lianxiu looked around unfriendly, and the uproar immediately disappeared. "That's not very good, right?" Yu Qianshou looked at everyone and muttered, "I just said that I would use 20 limit-breaking pills to ask everyone about the origins of these two people. Keep pretending." Sikongju resisted the urge to flare up again. He let out a breath and said, "I believe that it is best to leave the investigation of these two people to the world commerce." "That's true. The world commerce has branches in various countries, so it is indeed very suitable to do this. However," Yu Qianshou said to everyone, "I still have to ask everyone's opinion in case someone says that I'm going back on my word. What does everyone think?" Everyone naturally hoped that Niu Yud would continue to offer the restriction-breaking pill as a reward. Handing over the head to Sikongju wouldn't give them any benefits. But who would dare to go against Sikongju? He really wanted both money and face. Sikongju was so angry that he was laughing in his stomach. However, it couldn't be helped. His two disciples were well-known figures in the cultivation world. Once they showed their faces, they would definitely be recognized by a lot of people. Niu Yud had gotten 300 million from him, and 200 million of it was the deposit to join the World Chamber of Commerce. Once he found an excuse, he would really lose both the person and the money. Furthermore, this madman dared to blatantly deceive the various countries. Was there anything he wouldn't do? Who would dare to do this without some backing? In short, the World Commerce Chamber of Commerce did not dare to do what he did. If this madman used this as an excuse to start a fight with the World Commerce Association, who knew what the result would be? We can't lose the big for the small. Sikongju was rather suspicious. He didn't know if the World Commerce Chamber was right or wrong to offend this fellow, but he just felt that something was wrong. "Everyone." Sikongju cupped his hands at the surrounding cultivators and said, "This matter is not that Mr. Niu went back on his words. It's just that this ambush was targeted at our World Commerce Chamber. Our World Commerce Chamber has the responsibility to investigate who is going against us. Please give me, Sikongju, some face and don't make things difficult for Mr. Niu." "Why would I be in a difficult situation? Wouldn't it have been over if I had paid earlier? Why did I have to sell my face?" Yu Qianshou also looked at everyone apologetically. "We don't dare. We don't dare. We should." The group of people had no choice but to give in. If they didn't give Sikongju face, someone would probably take care of them the moment they left. However, Everyone more or less sensed that something was wrong, but they couldn't tell what was wrong. Mu Lianxiu bit her lips lightly, and her face was slightly pale. Sikongju stared at Yu Qianqiu and there was something in his eyes. Nyoyid, everyone knows that I've already done this. What else do you have to say? Yu Qianqiu wanted to laugh but he couldn't hold it in. Thus he smiled calmly and said, since you know that I like money, then I won't put on an act anymore. Shouldn't you give me the 100 million reward first before we talk? Facing a soul formation expert, he still felt a little guilty. Right now he believed in getting the money first. If anything happened, he was quite confident in his ability to escape. Everyone looked at each other and was really speechless at this Nyoyid. Sikongju was so angry that he couldn't say anything. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control his tone and give the other party an excuse. He stared at Nyoyid in silence for a while, then he took out a storage bag from his waist and threw it over without saying anything. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he reacted quickly by throwing the 2 heads in his right hand over as well. He caught the storage bag with his free hand and checked it. After realizing that the number was not bad, he put it away. Mu Lianxiu teleported in front of her master and caught the 2 heads before moving to the side. After taking a look and confirming that it was her junior brother, she nodded at her master with trembling lips. Sikongju stared at Yu Qianqiu like a hawk and said slowly, Mister, how is my disciple Niesheng? Why isn't he back yet? He only had 2 guesses about Niesheng's outcome. Either he was killed by Nyoyid or he was captured by Nyoyid. Sigh. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and let out a long sigh. He picked up the 7 heads in his left hand and pulled them out with his right hand before throwing one over. Everyone was speechless. Even though they had cultivated for a long time, they had never seen someone throwing heads like this. Sikongju grabbed Niesheng's head with one hand, and his long hair fluttered without any wind, causing Niesheng's face to be clearly visible. Second senior brother. Mu Lianxiu couldn't help but call out. Nyoyid, you better give me an explanation. Sikongju yelled. He couldn't hold back his killing intent anymore and burst out. The entire place was filled with killing intent, which scared the surrounding people. A soul formation stage expert was showing his prowess. Yu Qianqiu almost lost his footing due to the killing intent. Although he managed to stabilize himself, he felt that he couldn't breathe. His heart was gradually filled with anger. Using your power to suppress others? I want to see whether your early-stage soul formation aura is stronger, or my netherworld ghost flame aura is stronger. Yu Qianqiu squinted his eyes, and a horrifying aura surged out from his body, covering Sikongju like a raging wave. The temperature of the entire place instantly dropped to freezing point. It was clearly a sunny day, but there was a dense fog. Coldness, despair, death, and a series of extremely negative emotions filled the place. Sikongju, who was the main target of the horrifying aura, widened his eyes in horror. He actually trembled and took a step back. How could he have the energy to maintain his explosive aura? He was using all his strength to defend against the deathly aura that was devouring his life force. Mu Lianxiu, who was too close to his master, was immediately implicated. His body trembled uncontrollably, and the 2 heads in his hands fell to the ground. The most unlucky ones were the surrounding cultivators. Although they weren't at the center of the netherworld ghost flame aura, it was the first time Yu Qianqiu had used the aura of the ghost flame on a soul formation stage cultivator. He wasn't confident, so his attack wasn't light. The cultivator's cultivation was far inferior to Mu Lianxiu's, let alone Sikongju's. At the very least, no one present had the cultivation of the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. How could they withstand it? All of them immediately fainted and fell to the ground. No one was spared. The shop assistants in the row of shops had already fallen to the ground. The shopkeeper's cultivation wasn't bad, but they were all leaning on the counter for support as they looked over in fear. Nyoyid was surrounded by deathly aura as if he had just walked out from the netherworld. When Yu Qianqiu saw that Sikongju was actually forced to take a step back by his aura of the ghost flame, he instantly felt confident. He snorted and said, Sikongju, how dare you yell at me? Are you tired of living? Glancing at Sikongju's storage bag, he really wanted to use the star-absorbing technique to kill Sikongju and reap a sum of money. However, he held back after thinking about it. Sikongju looked at the large group of cultivators that had fallen to the ground. The shock in his heart was indescribable. At least, his master definitely couldn't suppress him to this extent with just his aura. If Nyoyid wanted to kill him now, it would be as easy as flipping his hand. So terrifying, such a terrifying aura. Just how high is this Nyoyid's cultivation? Sikongju calmed himself down and looked at Mu Lianxiu, who was on the verge of collapsing. He quickly said, "Mr. Niu, please don't misunderstand. I was being rude. We can talk things over. Please calm down for now. My disciple can't take your anger anymore." Yu Qianqiu snorted, and the eerie aura in the area instantly retracted into his body. The surroundings returned to being sunny under the blazing sun. Without that terrifying aura, Mu Lianxiu slumped to the ground. His face was pale as he gasped for breath under the sunlight. The shopkeepers in the shops also softened. At this moment, only Yu Qianqiu and Sikongju were still standing. The latter was indeed a soul formation expert. With his powerful cultivation, he quickly forced out the deathly aura in his body. Under the sunlight, it dissipated like ashes. Although he had recovered, he still looked at Yu Qianqiu with lingering fear. This person was too terrifying. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and threw the 6 heads to Sikongju's feet. Then he spread his arms and a series of groans could be heard. Gray mist rose from the bodies of the cultivators that were lying on the ground and spiraled into Yu Qianqiu's body. Afterward, the group of people slowly woke up and struggled to get up while panting. All of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in fear. Chapter 568. The scene before they fainted would probably be unforgettable. The despair under the pressure and the bone-piercing coldness. They had never seen such power before. A true expert. Before even making a move, just his aura alone was unstoppable. Now, everyone finally understood why Niu Yi dared to offend the masses and brazenly swindle money in the ghost manner. He indeed had the ability to do so and wasn't afraid of anyone finding him for revenge. Mu Lianxiu stared at the heads on the ground in a daze. She recognized them all as her own people. Sikongju also stared at the 9 heads on the ground silently. 3 of them were his disciples. As the number 2 of the World Commerce Association, when had he ever suffered such humiliation? He clearly knew the murderer was in front of him, but he didn't even dare to mention revenge. That head is Nie Sheng's? Someone accidentally saw it and let out a cry of surprise. It attracted everyone's attention and everyone gasped. They finally understood why Sikongju flipped out at Niu Yi. His disciples were killed. Could it be Niu Yi? Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. "Everyone, don't look at me. I didn't kill them." Yu Qianqiu looked around and denied it. He coughed and explained, "After we were ambushed, we continued on our way. Who knew that we would be ambushed by a group of people? The people who ambushed us this time were extraordinary. One of them actually fought to a draw with me. Because I was held up by that person, I couldn't help Nie Sheng and the rest. In the end, I could only watch as they were harmed. Luckily, I used all my strength and managed to snatch back the heads of Nie Sheng and the rest. How shameful." After speaking, he glanced at the doubtful crowd. As for whether they believed him or not, it wasn't something he had to worry about. The key was to have an explanation so that Sikongju could step down. The scene was silent. Sikongju took a deep breath and said to Mu Lianxiu, "Keep the head and try to find the mastermind as soon as possible to take revenge for the dead disciple." Mu Lianxiu replied, "Yes." She picked up the head on the ground and left. "I was rude just now. I hope sir doesn't take offense." Sikongju apologized with a gloomy expression. Although he looked calm on the surface, his heart was bleeding. After all, Nie Sheng is your disciple. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's get down to business. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand generously. "Mr. Please come in." Sikongju raised his hand. Yu Qianqiu nodded and followed him into the inner hall. The group of people who were left behind looked at each other in dismay, and then hurriedly left. They had to inform the sect of what happened here in time. By one nation's capital, Orchid City, Greenhouse Restaurant. On the 2nd floor, Yu Qianqiu stood by the window of the bustling street with his hands behind his back, looking at the bustling crowd on the street. Guan Zhangkai and Yu Lan accompanied him carefully, not daring to disturb him. The Green Mansion restaurant was known as the best restaurant in Orchid City. A private room by the window like this one would be hard to find if one didn't make a reservation in advance. Guan Zhangkai had even asked the steward of the World Chamber of Commerce's Lan City branch to make a reservation in advance. The trio's destination for this trip was the World Chamber of Commerce's headquarters, Cornucopia. However, when they passed by One Nation, Yu Qianqiu strongly requested to take a look there. Guan Zhangkai had seen his means, and in addition to the things that happened in the Gold Casting City branch, even his master suffered a loss. How could he dare to disobey him and could only accompany him? Actually, Guan Zhongkai had to thank Yu Qianqiu for being able to regain his freedom so quickly this time. Sikongju was originally prepared to personally accompany Yu Qianqiu, but after those things happened, how could he be in the mood to accompany him? It was useless to accompany him. With the other party's cultivation, if he wanted to run away, there was no way to stop him. It all depended on whether the other party was aware of it or not. Sikongju also didn't want to be angered by Yu Qianqiu again, so he found an excuse to rush back to the headquarters in advance and arranged for Mu Lianqiu to accompany him. However, Yu Qianqiu specifically picked Guan Zhongkai, saying that he liked Guan Zhongkai's character. He was forthright and didn't get along with others. Sikongju was forced into a corner and could only restore Guan Zhongkai's freedom. However, he was more or less on guard and couldn't help but tell his eldest disciple, Guan Zhongkai, to be careful. When Yu Qianqiu and Guan Zhongkai were about to leave the gold casting city branch, Yulan came to look for Guan Zhongkai. Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately lit up. He didn't expect that these two old enemies would be together. He immediately put on the airs of a senior and asked Yulan if she was willing to accompany him. Niu Yud had caused such a huge commotion in the gold casting city branch, and news of it had already spread throughout the cultivation world. Yulan had looked for Guan Zhongkai under orders to find out news of Niu Yud. He didn't expect to receive an invitation from Niu Yud, so he immediately asked his master. In the end, it attracted the attention of his master. Not only did they want him to accompany Niu Yud, but they also gave him some secret missions. It was because of this that the scene of the three of them at the Green Manor restaurant happened. They had just arrived. These flies are really annoying. I can't even finish swatting them. Yu Qianqiu looked downstairs and snorted coldly. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan looked at each other and looked out of the window. They saw two people sitting at the Liangpi stall opposite them eating. They would occasionally look in their direction, but when they saw that the person upstairs was staring at them, they lowered their heads and continued eating. Two early-stage tribulation transcending cultivators. I'll go deal with them so that they don't disturb Senior's mood. Guan Zhongkai turned and went downstairs. He was already somewhat used to it. Along the way there were too many people following them. When he and Yulan discovered them, they only gave them a warning. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would force the two of them to kill them? As long as there was an opportunity to kill them, he wouldn't let them go. These people following them were naturally sent by various factions. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan were a little apprehensive when they wanted to kill them. Who knew that when Yu Qianqiu saw the two of them hesitating, he bluntly said, "If you don't kill them, I'll kill you. Do as you see fit." Only then did the two of them remember that this smiling guy had a nickname, Ruthless Judge. They were quite frightened by his words and had no choice but to do as he said. Yulan was even more bitter after the incident. Why did they get on this pirate ship? Even if they got off the ship, they would still offend people from various countries with this massacre. What would they do in the future? Nonsense. Is this the place to make a move? Yu Qianqiu coldly snorted. There will be plenty of opportunities. Let's talk about it after we leave Lan City. Hearing this, Guan Zhongkai obediently walked back and repeatedly admitted his mistake. Senior, please don't blame me. I didn't think it through. Yu Qianqiu was slightly surprised. He squinted his eyes and looked down. A few people walking over from the side of the street attracted his attention. They were all old acquaintances. The elegant Yan Zhuixing and a young master in snow-white clothes holding a white fan were walking side by side in front. From time to time they would stop at various stalls. Man Hu and his martial brothers were behind them. At the very back there were 4 plainclothed guards holding sabers. The young master in white was none other than the princess of Baiwan Kingdom, Hipster, who was disguised as a man in Deyang City. Why are these guys here too? Why are they together? Yu Qianqiu muttered to himself. Guan Zhongkai and Yulan, who were on both sides of the window, noticed Yu Qianqiu's abnormality. They both stuck their heads out. The two of them weren't familiar with Yan Zhuixing and Hipster, but they knew Man Hu and his martial brothers. With their eyesight, they could naturally tell that the young master in white was a fake at first glance. The two of them also felt a little strange. They didn't know where this man and woman came from. They could actually make the disciple of Great Snow Mountain's Bing Qingzi be their follower. What made the two of them most curious was that Niu Yud's reaction seemed to know these people. The two of them were puzzled. Guan Zhongkai asked tentatively, "Senior, do you know them?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly and said, "I just feel that the combination of these people is a little strange. The 4 people in the middle are obviously at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, but why do they seem to be the followers of the 2 people in front? Could it be that there are as many people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage now? An ordinary person can casually grab a few of them to be his bodyguards? His explanation was reasonable. Anyone who knew the ropes would find it a little strange. The two of them immediately had their doubts cleared. At the same time, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. A spirit-severing expert was indeed powerful. He could easily see through the cultivation of the 4 people at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Little did they know that it would be strange if Yu Qianqiu could see through it. It was just that when he was in the Chinese cultivation world, he already knew that Man Hu and his martial brothers were at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Guan Zhangkai said with a flattering tone, "Although I don't know the 2 people in front, I know the 4 cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. Do you want me to call them up and ask them?" "Forget it." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "It's just 4 cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage. It's not worth worrying about." Guan Zhangkai, who was also at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, froze and shut up immediately. Under the gazes of the 3 people, they found that this group of people had also broken into the Green Mansion restaurant. After when Lan Feng suppressed the 6 experts at the final stage of the spirit-severing stage, his words of support for Yu Qianqiu made Yan Zhuoxing ponder for a long time. He couldn't figure out when Yu Qianqiu was related to Wen Lanfeng. As for what Wen Lanfeng said about admiring Yu Qianqiu's talent, he didn't believe it. Nobody would believe it, let alone him. They all guessed that there was some relationship between the 2 of them. Or when Lanfeng wanted to monopolize the treasure left by the demon monarch of swords in the mist forest, so he used the 6 experts to show off. After the battle that shocked the cultivation world, Bing Qingzi finally told Yan Zhuoxing about the secret of the demonic book. Yan Zhuoxing also finally understood why this master and disciple would do their best to help him. Later, Bing Qingzi invited Yan Zhuoxing to Dirong Nation, but he refused. The hero in Yu Qianqiu's hands could cause chaos in various countries. The amazing strength it showed made him covet it. He believed that with the information he had, he was confident that he could take Yu Qianqiu's hidden strength under his command. He always felt that it was a wonderful feeling to meet Yu Qianqiu in Baiwan Nation, as if it was a kind of fate that he couldn't explain. Therefore he decided to wait in Baiwan Nation. If his feeling was wrong and he couldn't meet Yu Qianqiu, he would go to the World Chamber of Commerce before the cornucopia to see the famous event in the cultivation world. Chapter 569. Seeing that Yan Zhuoxing insisted on staying, Bing Qingzi didn't insist. He just told Man Hu and the others to protect him. He also left 3 jade pendants for Yan Zhuoxing, so that he could summon Yan Zhuoxing for help when he encountered a threat that he couldn't resolve. After seeing Bing Qingzi off, Yan Zhuoxing's confidence was greatly boosted. In the past he was worried that the master and disciple were using him, so he had some scruples in his heart. He didn't expect that there was such a hidden story. He was actually the only successor of ancient diabolism in the human world, and he shouldered the heavy responsibility of reviving diabolism. During the time he wandered around Lan City, he met a domineering child with Man Hu and the others by chance, and they had some small conflicts. This child was obviously a fake, but he thought that others couldn't see through him. He wanted to beat him up, but he didn't expect that the cuffs of this fake were embroidered with the symbol of Baiwan country's royal family, which was a thumb-sized, lifelike dark green orchid. With the experience of Man Hu and the others, it wasn't difficult to guess the identity of this fake. Moreover, she was followed by 4 guards who couldn't be compared to the guards of ordinary rich families, so her identity was obvious. Yan Zhuoxing was quite interested in the Wen clan, so he made some effort to make friends with the hipster. As for what he wanted to do, only Yan Zhuoxing himself knew. Today the 2 of them made an appointment to have fun again. The hipster was good at playing, and they almost visited half of Lan City. After playing for half a day, the hipster finally felt a little tired. Coincidentally, the best restaurant in Lan City was nearby, so she excitedly pulled Yan Zhuoxing and the others into the restaurant. Yan Zhuoxing was a little surprised when he walked in. He looked around and didn't expect to see such an elegant and quiet restaurant in this busy city. The 100 Flowers House in the 100 Flowers Valley was a famous restaurant in the cultivation world of China, but he didn't know when he would see it again, which made him feel a little emotional. Hipster had already slammed the counter with a ping-ping sound. "Shopkeeper, I want the best private room." He really did sound like a boorish and forthright man, but his voice seemed a little too weak. The manager who was smiling at her was slightly stunned. He also realized that the hipster was a woman dressed as a man. He didn't expose her but squeezed out a smile and said, "Sir, you really came at a bad time. The best private room is already occupied. Do you want me to check if there are any other seats? Wen Qing's pretty face tightened. She was a descendant of the heavens, and when she lost her temper, even the current emperor had to listen to her. When had she ever done something like taking a step back? A small restaurant actually dared to reject her request. Just as she was about to fly into a rage, she turned her head to look at the elegant Yan Juexing. In order not to ruin her image, she forcefully suppressed her rage. He left the counter and waved the fan in his hand. The guards at the back understood. One of them stepped forward and secretly took out a golden token. He waved it at the manager and said in a deep voice, "Manager, please ask the guests in the private room to move aside. We will compensate them double for their losses." When the shopkeeper saw the golden token, his expression changed. This was not the first time he had encountered something like this. He was experienced and knowledgeable, so he could tell at a glance that it was a token from the imperial palace. The guest in front of him was actually a distinguished guest from the imperial palace. As a merchant, how could he dare to offend the nobles in the palace? He nodded repeatedly and bowed. "I have eyes but failed to see. I'll go ask the guests in the box to give up their seats." "Wait a minute. Wait a minute." After saying that, he immediately ran upstairs. "Brother Yan, I'm really sorry for spoiling your mood." Wen Qing held a fan and apologized to Yan Juexing. Looking at her appearance, she seemed to care about Yan Juexing's feelings. Yan Juexing smiled gently and said, "It's all right." Man Hu and his brothers looked at each other and smiled, not saying a word. Some things were just so coincidental. The people in the so-called best private room were none other than Yu Qianqiu and the other two. Just as the dishes were being served, the shopkeeper walked in with a smile and waved away the waiters who were serving the dishes. He cupped his hands at them and said, "Distinguished guests, I'm really sorry. I might have to trouble you to change your seats." "Change seats?" Guan Zhongkai was startled and said, "What do you mean?" He didn't understand at once. Looking out the window, Yu Qianqiu had some guesses in his heart. The princess of Baiwan country had arrived, and this was the best private room in the green residence. "I'm afraid it's related to that girl." The shopkeeper smiled bitterly and said, "I hope the distinguished guests can understand. It's really because a few distinguished guests from the palace have come and specifically asked for this private room. I have no choice but to do this. But don't worry, after changing seats, we won't charge a single cent for all expenses, it's all free." He also knew that customers who could afford to eat in such a high-class place wouldn't care about that little bit of money. What they ate was their mood. He could only bring up the distinguished guests from the palace and hope that they would back off in the face of difficulties, so as to avoid any unpleasantness. It's business. It's better to avoid trouble. Harmony makes money. Yu Qianqiu sneered in his heart. As expected, it's related to that girl. Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan's expressions changed at the same time. This was too much of a slap in the face. With their status in the cultivation world, it was the first time that they were forced to give up their seats for a meal in the secular world. However, Wen Lanfeng was quite powerful in the cultivation world today. Even the secular mortals of the Wen family enjoyed the protection of Wen Lanfeng, so they couldn't casually provoke him. If it were any other time, they would endure it and get over it. But today it wasn't just them, there was also Niu Yud here. It was really a dilemma for the two of them. The shopkeeper saw that the two of them didn't look too good and knew that it wasn't good for the guests to say something like lowering their heads, so he comforted them with kind words. "Hey, we can't afford to offend the emperor. Everyone, don't take it to heart. I'll arrange a better place for you." Just as he was about to turn around, he heard someone say, "People from the palace? Is it someone from the Wen family?" The shopkeeper turned around and saw that it was the person who had his back to him and was looking out the window. Looking at the situation in the room, this person was the one who could call the shots. He immediately replied, "It should be someone from the royal Wen family. The guard is holding a token from the palace. Go tell them that even if the emperor of the Wen family comes, he won't dare to disturb me. Tell them to wait on the side and don't look for trouble," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Others might be afraid of Wen Lanfeng, but he really wasn't. Ah! The shopkeeper was surprised. Someone actually dared to say such treasonous words in the capital of Baiwan nation. If they weren't crazy, then they had a powerful background. But looking at these people, they clearly weren't crazy. Could there be someone more powerful than the emperor? This. The shopkeeper didn't know what to say. He had never seen someone who didn't even give face to the royal family. Seeing that Niu Yud had stood up for them, Guan Zhongkai and Yu Lan had nothing else to say. The latter said in a deep voice, "Hurry up and go." The shopkeeper suddenly felt his scalp go numb. He felt that he was in big trouble today. Neither side was easy to deal with. After responding, he didn't even know how he went downstairs. When he saw the people downstairs, he thought that he definitely couldn't afford to offend the royal family, so he simply pushed the responsibility away and said to the guard with a bitter face, "I told the guests upstairs your identity, but they still refused to give up their seats." Yan Zhuixing, Man Hu, and the others looked at each other and felt a little strange. There were mortals in the secular world who dared to not give face to the royal family? Could it be people from the cultivation world? Wen Qing's pretty face turned cold and said, "There's such a thing? Which family is so arrogant? Go throw them out for me." The princess's temper completely exploded. 2 guards immediately rushed upstairs, but after a while they didn't even hear the sound of fighting. They saw 2 people directly thrown down from upstairs, knocking over 2 tables in the lobby. They lay on the ground motionless and no one knew whether they were dead or alive. They had already made their move. Without waiting for the scholar, whose face had turned green, to say anything else, the other 2 guards pulled out their sabers with a schwa sound. They bent their knees and jumped straight up to the 2nd floor. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, the 2 guards would be thrown down the stairs along with their swords. The guests who were able to eat in this kind of place were people who were used to seeing scenes. They didn't panic when they saw people fighting. Instead, they surrounded with interest to watch the show. The shopkeeper secretly gave a glance to a waiter. The waiter understood and ran to report to the authorities. "Rebel, rebel." Wen Qing's sharp voice roared. "Brother Wen, don't be anxious." Yan Zhuixing smiled and patted Wen Qing's shoulder. Wen Qing's body trembled and his cheeks turned crimson. As expected, he didn't roar anymore. Yan Zhuixing looked at Man Hu. The latter nodded and lightly jumped up. As if he was taking a stroll in the courtyard, he landed on the 2nd floor and pushed open the door that had already thrown out the 4 guards. Man Hu's elegant movements immediately won the applause of the entire hall. It was obvious that he was much more skilled than the 4 guards. Many people praised good martial arts. Wen Qing's eyes were shining as he looked at Yan Zhuixing. He didn't expect Yan Zhuixing to have such an expert by his side. He was even better than the Imperial Guards. He didn't know where Yan Zhuixing came from. Everyone stared at the door upstairs. This time they didn't see any movement like the previous 2 times. After waiting for a while, they saw Man Hu open the door and come out. He turned around and bowed to the inside. Then he gently closed the door. Tiske. The group of people who were watching the show suddenly felt bored. They thought they could see a big show. Who knew that it was a good-looking but useless pushover who actually went up and bowed to them? Yan Zhuixing and the others were surprised. Who exactly was upstairs? How could Man Hu be so respectful to them? The innkeeper's mouth opened. It seemed that the person inside wasn't simple. He could actually make the Imperial Guards bow to him. What was his background? Man Hu jumped down and shouted to the innkeeper, "Innkeeper, quickly serve the guests upstairs." Then he walked to the side of the few people and said, "It's Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du." The 3 juniors looked at each other in confusion. Old 7 frowned and said, "Isn't it Guan Zhongkai and Yulan Du? Does eldest senior brother need to give them face?" Wen Qing looked at them strangely. He didn't know who they were talking about. Man Hu shook his head and said, "If it was just the 2 of them, it wouldn't be a problem. The key is that Niu Yud is also inside." While they were talking, Yu Qianqiu, who was upstairs, looked at the 2 people walking down the street. The corner of his mouth twitched. What made him even more dumbfounded was that the 2 people actually barged into the Green Mansion restaurant. Chapter 570. There were strange things every year, but there were many this year. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. The 2 people who came in just now were not strangers. One was Wen Chongjing, the 2nd son of Wen Yuyuan, the Pingxing king of Baiwan, and the other was Mr. Nongzhu from the famous purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. Yu Qianqiu couldn't figure out how these 2 guys got together. They didn't match at all. But it was understandable. The scene where Wen Chongjing mistook him for Mr. Nongzhu was still vivid in his mind. Presumably, when he saw the real Mr. Nongzhu, he would worship him like an ancestor. His guess was right. It was true. Nongzhu hadn't been to Lan City for a long time. He just sneaked out from Wen Lanfeng's place to have a look, and the streets were full of distinguished people. His appearance, which could charm women to death, was too conspicuous on the street, causing the women on the street to frequently turn their heads, their bashful eyes flying all over the sky, enough to drown a person to death. He was used to this kind of thing and didn't take it seriously at all. As he strolled, he didn't expect to meet Wen Chongjing, who was with a group of scoundrels. In fact, Nongzhu had forgotten who this guy was, but Wen Chongjing had seen him in Daong Kingdom. Wen Chongjing dreamed of flattering such a person every day. How could he forget him? He immediately left his group of scoundrels and shamelessly came up to introduce himself, saying that they had met in Daong City, that he was the son of someone, and that he was willing to work for him. Nongzhu finally remembered who this guy was. He did see him in the embassy of Baiwan in Daong City. Since he was a member of the Wen family and was willing to work for him, she didn't embarrass him. Anyway, it was not bad to have a free guide. So he was brought here by Wen Chongjing while they were strolling. It was necessary to bring him here. This was the best restaurant in Lan City, so Wen Chongjing naturally had to bring Mr. Nongzhu to the best place. Otherwise, how could he live up to Mr. Nongzhu's identity? Nyoyud? Why is he here? Yes. Why are Guan Zhangkai and Yulan here with him? Yan Zhuixing, old 7, and the others were indeed a little surprised. Niu Yud's recent limelight in the cultivation world was no less than Wen Lanfeng's. Who would have thought that they would meet here? I was on my way to the World Chamber of Commerce and passed by here. Man who explained. Hipster asked with a confused face, who are you talking about? Why haven't I heard of it before? However, all of them were deep in thought and none of them paid any attention to her, causing her to pout unhappily. However, after glancing at Yan Zhuixing, she endured it. At this moment, 2 people came in through the door. One of them shouted, "Manager, hurry up and give me the best private room. If you're late, I'll make you pay." The few of them looked over and were stunned. Only Yan Zhuixing did not recognize any of them. Wen Chongjing was obviously a regular here, and the shopkeeper also knew him. He immediately ran over with a bitter face and saluted, "Little prince, you're here. That box has already been occupied." He couldn't finish his sentence. He was depressed. Why were all the people who came today so tough? What should he do? The people in the box even dared to attack the people from the palace. He really didn't know if they would give face to the little prince. Wen Chongjing was about to get angry, but he found Hipster staring at him. They were stunned at the same time and almost said in unison, "Why are you here?" When Man Hu and his brother saw Nongzhu, they were even more stunned. Why did Mr. Nongzhu, who was famous in the cultivation world, come here? Nongzhu also looked at these guys with a tired face. When Hipster saw Nongzhu walking leisurely behind Wen Chongjing, her face suddenly changed. She hurriedly bowed and saluted. Hipster greets Mr. Nongzhu. She was frightened by the fake Nongzhu that Yu Qianqiu had impersonated. Although the real Nongzhu did not do anything to her after she returned, her father, the emperor, was still furious because of that matter. If Wen Bai hadn't pleaded for her, she would have been beaten to death by her father. She had never seen her father so angry with her. It was very scary. After being severely punished, she was grounded for a month. She finally understood what her uncle Wen Yuan said to her in Daong City. If you offend Mr. Nongzhu, even your father can't protect you. Hearing Hipster's words, Yan Zhuixing was stunned. He didn't expect that this person was Mr. Nongzhu, the owner of the purple bamboo forest in the South Sea. His eyes flashed. No wonder he was the most handsome man in the cultivation world, Mr. Nongzhu. His style was unparalleled. Man Hu and the others were also stunned. They didn't expect this woman to know Mr. Nongzhu. Although they were a little unhappy because they had been defeated by Nongzhu's disciple, Zi, they didn't dare to be disrespectful. After all, Nongzhu's cultivation was obvious. They immediately went over and saluted, "Greetings, Mr. Nongzhu." Yan Zhuixing naturally followed. "You little guys, why are you here?" "You're welcome." Nongzhu waved his hand casually. He was naturally qualified to call Man Hu and the others little guys. When the shopkeeper heard Hipster refer to herself as Hipster, he was startled. It turned out that this woman who came from the palace dressed as a man was actually the current princess. Who was this Mr. Nongzhu? Even the princess had to salute him. After knowing the identity of Hipster, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed, "Greetings, Your Highness." The group of onlookers also understood that it was the princess. So the people kneeling on the ground greeted the princess. Wen Chongjing, who was standing aside, was suddenly in high spirits. It couldn't be better to meet the princess here. Once the princess brought the news that he was with Mr. Nongzhu back to the palace, it would definitely cause a great uproar. Even if he had nothing to do with Mr. Nongzhu, who would dare to look down on him? Just as he was holding back his excitement, he suddenly saw Mr. Nongzhu frowning at the people kneeling on the ground. He immediately woke up and hurriedly shouted to the shopkeeper, "Shopkeeper, clear these people out of here immediately." Hipster also noticed Nongju's reaction. He immediately raised his hand to the crowd and said, "No need to be so polite. Get up." The group of people thanked the princess and got up. They saw the shopkeeper leading a group of waiters to get rid of the crowd. They didn't even take the money but just urged the crowd to leave. Some people were not happy at first. But when they thought that the princess was here and the little prince was here, no one dared to disturb them. They left immediately. This was the difference between the common people and the nobles. Obviously, Nongju didn't expect that eating would make such a big noise. His face was slowly showing his unhappiness. When Chongjing was shocked, he shouted to the shopkeeper again, "Shopkeeper, have you cleared the box I asked for? Take us there quickly." The shopkeeper was about to cry. The people upstairs even dared to beat the princess's people. He didn't dare to offend them. He had to bow to Hipster for help. "Your Highness, please say something." Hipster glanced at Nongju. Her eyes suddenly lit up. Even the emperor was afraid of this person. He must be able to deal with the people upstairs. Thus, he pulled on Wen Chongjing's sleeve and obediently complained, "Brother Wang, the best private room has already been occupied by someone, and they even beat up my guards." He looked at the lobby where Hipster was pointing. He didn't notice it if he didn't look carefully. There were 4 people lying on the ground. He didn't know whether they were alive or dead. Who had eaten leopard's gall to actually dare to hit the imperial guards? When Chongjing was about to get angry, but he felt that something was wrong. His sister was an unruly princess. Would it be a good thing if she was bullied? How could she stand there without any reaction and complain to him? Ghost. When Chongjing looked at Nongju, Nongju also felt a little strange. Someone dared to bully the princess in the capital. This was Wen Lanfeng's territory. Even ordinary cultivators wouldn't dare to do this. She looked at Manhu and asked, "Manhu, what's going on? Who's in the box upstairs? Is it the ice-old man in your house? That's not right. Didn't he go back to the Great Snow Mountain?" He was sure that Manhu and the others already knew who the person upstairs was. Since they could mix with the princess, they were Bing Qingzi's disciples. Their guts weren't small. They couldn't watch the princess being bullied. Now they all stood there indifferently. Obviously they had met a tough guy. Manhu paused and cupped his fists. "It's Guanzhongkai and Yulan. They're accompanying Senior Nyo inside." Nongju said suspiciously, "Senior Nyo? Is Nyo yet upstairs?" She had heard from Wen Lanfeng that Guanzhongkai and Yulan had accompanied Nyo Yid to the World Chamber of Commerce. After all, this matter was now known by everyone in the cultivation world. Naturally, she guessed it was Nyo Yid. "It's Senior Nyo Yid," Manhu replied. Hipster, Wen Chongjing, and the shopkeeper had never heard of these names. They didn't know where these big shots came from. They were all confused. However, Nongju's eyes lit up. She wanted to meet this mysterious Nyo Yid to see who he was. He actually dared to make such a big move in the cultivation world. He was really bold. She didn't expect to meet him here. She turned to look at Wen Chongjing and found that although this guy liked to flatter, he was still a good person. Speaking of which, she had to thank this guy. Otherwise, she would have to go to the World Chamber of Commerce if she wanted to see the mysterious Nyo Yid again. She laughed and said, "Nyo Yid is here? I'd like to go up and see." "Sir, do you want me to go up with you?" Wen Chongjing nodded and bowed. Nongju's admiring look just now made him feel as if he was injected with chicken blood. He was suddenly in high spirits. Seeing Nongju waving her hand, he quickly and obediently retreated to the side. At this moment, there was a sudden sound of orderly running outside. From the sound, there were probably dozens of people. Then someone shouted, "Surround this place. Don't let the beating bandits escape." It turned out that after the shop assistant reported the case, the arresting officers had arrived. Nongju looked back and frowned. She pointed at Wen Chongjing and said, "Boy, let the officers outside guard the door and don't let anyone in to disturb us. If you mess up, you'll be in trouble." "Yes, yes, yes." Wen Chongjing nodded repeatedly. He thought it was Nongju's honor to do this, so he ran out eagerly. With his identity as a young prince and the princess inside, it was naturally easy to settle this matter. Nongju was neither too fast nor too slow. She slowly walked up the stairs with her hands behind her back. Chapter 571. Nongju from the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest is here to pay a visit. Nongju stood in front of the door and introduced herself. She didn't care if the people inside agreed or not. She pushed the door open and went in. As soon as she went in, Guanzhongkai and Yulan both bowed and said, "Nice to meet you, Mr. Nongju." Nongju waved her hand and her eyes fell on the back of the figure at the window. This figure was so familiar. And that arrogant posture, she had seen it more than once or twice. It was exactly the same as someone. Nongju's face gradually darkened and she said in a low voice, "Get out of here, both of you." Guan Zhangkai and Yulan looked at each other. They knew she was talking about them. The strange thing was that Nongju was polite just now. Why did she turn hostile in the blink of an eye? But from what she said, Nongju seemed to know Niu Yud. They didn't go out immediately. Instead they looked at Niu Yud. To them, Niu Yud was much scarier than Nongju. Yu Qianqiu looked out of the window and couldn't help smiling bitterly. Was there a need to say it? Nongju obviously recognized him at a glance. It was not easy to hide one's identity in front of familiar people. "You go out first. I have something to say to Mr. Nongju." Yu Qianqiu said calmly. "Yes." Guan Zhangkai and Yulan retreated respectfully, closing the door behind them. Nongju's face twitched. What was going on? Yin Baikang's disciple and Shengguan Taiping's disciple were so obedient to Yu Qianqiu. Nongju was speechless when she thought of the three enemies fighting in Daong Kingdom. This guy really knew how to torment people. After setting up a sound barrier in the room, Nongju sat in front of the table and said coldly, "I was wondering where Niu Yud came from. So it's you. Should I call you Niu Yud or Yu Qianqiu?" In fact, he had long suspected that Niu Yud was Yu Qianqiu. It was just that the rumor that Niu Yud was a soul formation expert made him unconvinced. This time, in addition to the commotion that Niu Yud had caused in the gold casting city branch, the eerie aura that threatened Sikongju made Nongju even more suspicious that he was Yu Qianqiu. Others might not know, but he had experienced it before. He was one of the few people who knew about Yu Qianqiu's netherworld ghost flame. Now that he saw Niu Yud in person, he had even less doubts. Who else could it be but that kid? But then again, if Niu Yud's deeds were not so similar to the Yu Qianqiu that Nongju knew, even if she saw Niu Yud, she would not be able to insist that he was Yu Qianqiu. After all, there were many people with similar figures in this world. Who dared to say that people with similar figures must be the same person? It was unreasonable. Yu Qianqiu looked around outside the window and closed it. He turned around and bowed. "Senior Nongju, long time no see, I missed you so much." As he spoke, he fiddled with the dishes on the table and filled the empty cup in front of Nongju with wine. "Come on, you missed me?" Nongju sneered. "I'm afraid you can't wait for me to scram as far away as possible." Yu Qianqiu chuckled, not minding it. The two of them bickering would not hurt their relationship. He had to be thick-skinned to deal with this old fox, or else he would be the one to suffer. After downing a cup of wine, he sat opposite Nongju and asked, "Is Fu Rong still on Shantian Island? How is she now? Is she not used to it?" When he mentioned Fu Rong, Nongju thought of Ziyi and felt flustered. She replied indifferently, "Your master treats her much better than you. He personally gave her a middle-grade spiritual treasure and has approved her to live on Shantian Island. With the protection of the world's #1 master, who can live a better life than her." Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. Why did he hear a hint of jealousy in Nongju's words? He did not care about Nongju's feelings. He patted his chest carefully and breathed a sigh of relief. That's good, that's good. I was worried that my master would be unhappy and would not allow Fu Rong to live on Shantian Island." As he spoke, he stood up again and walked to Nongju, making a deep bow. He said with unprecedented sincerity to Nongju, "Senior, thank you for taking care of Fu Rong for me. I, Yu Qianqiu, will remember this favor and will definitely repay it in the future." Nongju was stunned. She had never seen this guy so sincere to her. Just because of that silly girl? What's so good about that silly girl? How can she be better than my Z? He swallowed his saliva with difficulty and asked disapprovingly, "Look at how serious you are. Is hibiscus really that good? Why can't I see it? Tell me what's so good about that silly girl?" There was no need to mention how depressed he was in his heart. No matter if it was in terms of appearance or anything else, his daughter Ziyi was clearly superior to Furong. But it was strange that this guy, who was obviously not a good person, was so concerned about that girl and took care of her. What made him even more puzzled was that even Bai Changchun had taken a liking to that silly girl. Yu Qianqiu shook his head contentedly. "There's nothing good or bad about it. Like you said, she's just a silly girl. She's so silly that no matter what I do, she's willing to follow me. This is enough for me to cherish her. There's no other reason." Nongju was speechless, but she looked at Yu Qianqiu thoughtfully. "Hey, did you say that my master gave Fu Rong a middle-grade spiritual treasure?" Yu Qianqiu finally realized that he had forgotten this because he was thinking about Fu Rong. He remembered that when he asked his master for it, his master said that he didn't have it. Based on his master's character, he wouldn't lie to him. Alas. Nongzhu sighed. Nanming failed to refine an upper-grade spiritual treasure, so he settled for the second best and made it a middle-grade spiritual treasure. Your master has no use for it, so he gave it to Fu Rong. Alas. With old Bai's cultivation, it's not a good thing to go to the East Holy Land without a suitable weapon. Failed? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Then he patted his forehead and said as if he thought of something, I have a few good things here, but I don't know if my master can use them. Then he took out a sword from his storage bag and handed it to Nongzhu. Senior, please show it to my master and see if he can use it. Nongzhu looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. After taking the sword, her eyes suddenly lit up and she couldn't help but exclaim. She stood up and stroked the sword. The sword was cold to the touch, and there were undecipherable ancient patterns on it. The whole sword didn't look luxurious and it looked very low-key and old. But with Nongzhu's cultivation, she immediately felt that there was a huge momentum inside it. Once it was activated, it would be invincible. Good sword. Nongzhu couldn't help but praise it. She held it in her hand and shook it. She wanted to test its power but found that she couldn't control it. When she injected her divine sense into it to check, she couldn't help but gasp, what a powerful remnant divine sense. It can actually resist the invasion of my divine sense. I can't even expel it with my cultivation. Then she suddenly raised her head and stared at Yu Qianqiu with a solemn face. She asked, this sword is definitely comparable to a top-grade spiritual treasure. Brat, tell me honestly, whose sword is this? Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and said, of course it's my sword. If it's not mine, how can I give it to my master? Don't talk nonsense with me. A cold light flashed across Nongzhu's hand and rested on Yu Qianqiu's neck. She narrowed her eyes and said threateningly, this sword obviously has an owner, but its spiritual mind has been damaged, which means that the original owner of this sword is no longer in this world. Even so, such a powerful remnant divine sense is definitely not something you can have. I didn't expect that there was someone with such a high cultivation in this world. Tell me honestly, whose sword is this? Before Yu Qianqiu could answer, Nongzhu suddenly understood and said, I see. You pretended to be me and now you pretended to be Niu Yid. I guess the original owner of this sword is a person named Niu Yid. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought that this guy's imagination was too rich. Seeing that there was no way to deny it, he honestly pointed to the sky. What do you mean? Nongzhu asked suspiciously. Alas. I'm afraid you won't believe me even if I tell you. Yu Qianqiu gently pushed away the sword on his neck and said with a wry smile, I got this sword in the mist forest. It belongs to an immortal in the immortal world. Can you believe it? Mist forest? Nongzhu suddenly became energetic and said excitedly, yes. I heard that you were able to break into the mist forest. Your master even asked me to ask you what's going on. Tell me quickly, what's the matter with the treasure left by the demon of swords? He casually pulled a chair and sat down. My master asked you to ask this? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head awkwardly. He knew that no matter how ridiculous Nongzhu was, she would never use his master, Bai Changchun, to talk nonsense. It was most likely that his master really asked him to ask. Generally speaking, although Nongzhu was not a good person, she was still trustworthy when it came to serious matters. But the key point was that he made up the name of the demon of swords. An honest person like him could not possibly admit that he was lying. After thinking for a while, he felt that it was not a big deal. He only said that because he was forced to fight back. He did not do anything wrong. Hence, from the moment he was hunted down to the moment he charged into the misty forest, he recounted everything he had seen and heard. However, he still concealed the fact that he had the golden bead to detoxify the poison. It was the only thing that could save his life. As a person drifting in the world, he had to leave a way to protect himself. Yu Qianqiu described the process of being chased as extremely miserable. It was simply a path of blood and tears. It was as pitiful as one could imagine. In the end, he was forced into a dead end and risked his life to break into the horrifying mist forest. Nongzhu was sometimes moved and sometimes her eyes were filled with murderous intent. Just imagine if he was not forced into a dead end, who would dare to take the risk of breaking into the mist forest? Nongzhu snorted coldly and said, for the sake of two imaginary treasured sabers, the countries actually did such a thing. They are really obsessed. She pointed at Yu Qianqiu and scolded, you're a pig. You've already been forced into such a situation, why don't you use your master? Isn't old man Bai's name used to scare people? Let's see who dares to touch you. Chapter 572. Motherf asterisk her. You make it sound good. You know I'm Bai Changchun's disciple. When have I ever scared you? Yu Qianqiu cursed silently. But he said proudly, they're just a bunch of scums. There's no need to bring up my master. Nongzhu couldn't help looking at his arrogance. She thought to herself, like master like disciple. Although this kid's character is not good, he is similar to Bai Changchun in some ways. No wonder old Bai accepted him as his disciple. When she heard Yu Qianqiu say that he killed more than 2,000 cultivators without even blinking, Nongzhu was even more shocked. Nongzhu secretly clicked her tongue. Old Bai was indeed cruel and merciless. Nongzhu was dumbfounded and shook her head in disbelief. The legendary immortal ascension stage is in the mist forest. Unbelievable. So the colorful fog is called the soul-transforming smoke. Even an immortal can't resist it. It's really vicious. By the way, why aren't you afraid of the soul-transforming smoke? Who knows? If you ask me, who should I ask? Yu Qianqiu picked up his chopsticks and ate happily. With food in his mouth, he stammered, I guess it has something to do with the skill I'm practicing. My master said that the skill I'm practicing is the most sacred skill between heaven and earth. It's just the soul-transforming smoke. The most sacred skill between heaven and earth? Nongzhu's face was full of envy. She carried the sword on her shoulder and said patiently, Yu Qianqiu, what's the name of your skill? Can you show me your incantation? You can ask my master. I can't make the decision. Yu Qianqiu smoothly mentioned Bai Changchun. Nongzhu was speechless. However, her eyes were fixed on the fine steel bracelet on Yu Qianqiu's left wrist. Yu Qianqiu threw the sword into his storage bag. His body flashed. Before he knew what was going on, he found that the bracelet on his wrist was gone. He immediately roared, Nongzhu, what are you doing? Give it back to me. Nongzhu turned a deaf ear to him. She took the bracelet and injected her divine sense into it to check it. Then she clicked her tongue and said, You are so lucky. There are treasures everywhere. Oh my God. A storage bracelet used by an immortal. This was probably the only one in the world. Good stuff, good stuff. By the way, what about the things inside? Where did you hide it? Take it out for me to see. Yu Qianqiu smashed the chopsticks in his hand on the table and snorted, Show you? If you snatch it away, who am I going to ask for it? What are you talking about? Am I that kind of person? Take it out and let me have a look. I've seen a lot of things in my life. I'm just short of immortals. Nongzhu winked at him. However, his eyes were darting around Yu Qianqiu's body, as if he was looking for a place to hide something. Recalling the scene of Yu Qianqiu taking out the sword from the storage bag, he dashed over without hesitation and grabbed the storage bag. However, after shaking it out for a long time, there were only a few spiritual stones. Nongzhu was stunned. Don't tell me you've hidden a few more storage bags with you? I'm afraid that I'll meet someone like you who hides all the valuable things. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand in disdain. Give me back the bracelet. Why are you so stingy? You've hidden a lot of treasures, but you don't need this. Give it to me to play with for a while. I'll give it back to you when the time comes. Nongzhu played with the bracelet fondly and put it on his wrist. He was quite satisfied with it. To be honest, he really liked it. Other than being an item from the immortal realm, it was really practical. Which cultivator wouldn't like such a large storage space? Give it back to me when the time comes? He didn't know how long he would have to wait. Yu Qianqiu looked at him coldly and said indifferently, I can give it to you, but you have to give me something in exchange. I heard from Ze that the purple bamboos in the South Sea purple bamboo forest can produce spiritual energy. I want half of them. What? Nongzhu suddenly realized and said, No, not even one. I knew that you love bamboo as much as your life. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, Now you know who's stingy. I'm giving you treasures from the immortal realm in exchange for your bamboos. I'm at a disadvantage, but you won't even give me one. Nongzhu smiled embarrassedly and touched the bracelet on his wrist. He suddenly sighed and said, It's not that I want it. I just want to find a unique treasure for Ze as a dowry. Yu Qianqiu looked at his lonely face and knew that he didn't seem to be lying. He opened his mouth and was stunned for a while. Then he asked curiously, As a dowry for Ze? Is Ze going to marry someone? Who is she going to marry? Which family does she belong to? How can she be liked by you, Mr. Nongzhu? Tell me and see if I know her or not. If I don't know her, at least let me know in advance so that I won't offend my own people. Bang! Nongzhu banged the table and shouted, It's none of your business who she marries. *CK. You snatched my stuff and still turned against me. Yu Qianqiu was also angry. He banged the table and shouted even louder, "It's none of my business? Give me back the bracelet. Why should my treasures be used as a dowry for your daughter? What kind of logic is this? Who cares about your treasures? Even if you give me 10,000 treasures, they can't compare to my Zi." Nongju's face was livid and he threw the bracelet on his wrist. Yu Qianqiu caught it with one hand and his arm became numb. He gritted his teeth and put the bracelet back on his wrist. He sneered and said, "It's good that you don't care about it. It's not like I have too many treasures to spend. I don't believe that anyone will complain about having too many treasures." While they were quarreling, Guan Zhangkai and Yu Landu were chatting with Man Hu and others downstairs. They didn't know that the two people upstairs had turned against each other. After the quarrel, Nongju sat there in the box with a dull face and didn't say a word. "I'm so angry, you old bastard." Yu Qianqiu picked up a new pair of chopsticks and ate to his heart's content. The only sound in the room was the sound of his chewing. Nongju didn't come to herself until Yu Qianqiu burped. She looked at Yu Qianqiu helplessly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, tell me the truth. What do you think of the man in purple?" *CK. She's not marrying me. It's none of my business whether he's good or bad. Yu Qianqiu licked the grease on his mouth and put down the chopsticks. He looked at Nongju and shook his head. He thought, this old handsome guy has the syndrome of marrying off his daughter. I won't argue with you, a patient. He picked up the tea and poured it into his mouth. He rinsed his mouth and flushed the residue in his mouth into his stomach. He tilted his head and thought silently. Nongju looked at his rude and uncultured look and she hated him a little. She imagined that she had been elegant in the cultivation world all her life. At the end of the day she met such a guy. It was karma. Yu Qianqiu thought for a while. Suddenly he stretched his head and said suspiciously, "Is Zi really going to get married? Why didn't I hear anything about it before?" "Well, a grown girl can't be kept at home. I can't keep her for a lifetime." Nongju nodded slightly and then asked expressionlessly, "You seem to care a lot about Zi. What do you think about her getting married?" Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot, with a look of "what can I think?" But he still said, "A grown girl can't be kept at home. You're right. You finally figured it out. That's the reason. Seriously, who is she going to marry? Tell me about it first. I often get into conflicts with others. If I meet your son-in-law, I'll hit him too hard and accidentally. Well, But in his heart he was thinking, damn it, he didn't know whose son Nongju liked. He must have a powerful background. Damn it. He could use Nongju to build a good relationship with him. Maybe he would be a good helper. No, why did Nongju suddenly come to Baiwan country? Now she inexplicably said that Zi was going to get married. Did Wen Lanfeng have a son or a grandson? Never heard of it. Well, it shouldn't be a grandson. If so, the seniority between Nongju and Wen Lanfeng would be reduced by one generation for nothing. If Nongju and Zi knew what he was thinking, they would probably torture him to death on the spot. Nongju raised her eyebrows and sneered, "You're so cunning. Don't tell me that you've been thinking about Zi for a long time. Now you want to find out who Zi is going to marry from me, and then you can hurt her." Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded when he heard that. He then clapped and said, "My God. Senior Nongju, you're really daring. But don't think too much. Let me tell you this." Yu Qianqiu stood up and said happily, "Zi, she's really good looking. Since she's going to get married, I'll admit it honestly. I did have some thoughts about her at the beginning. But don't get me wrong. It's not love. It's purely because she's beautiful. Well, we're both men, so I'm a little tempted." Seeing that Nongju was a little crazy, he quickly waved his hands and said, "Don't get me wrong. Let me finish." Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed, "Let me tell you this. I had some thoughts about her at the beginning, but I immediately extinguished it. To be honest, I'm not afraid to let you know that I have 3 or 4 women, not just Farong. Because I know that even if I have feelings for Zi, you will definitely not agree to a man who has several women like me and Zi. In addition, because of your relationship with my master, I can't afford to offend you. Naturally, I gave up the idea early. So, you can rest assured that no matter who Zi marries, based on our relationship, I will only sincerely bless her and will never do anything to hurt your son-in-law. That's a bit unreliable. Anyway, I'm a dignified man. My character is not as bad as you think." Bang. No one knew when Nongju's hand had touched the teacup on the table, but it was suddenly crushed by him. Yu Qianqiu was startled and couldn't help asking, "What's wrong with you?" Nongju's face turned black. She couldn't help trembling and said, "What did you say?" You said that you have 3 or 4 women other than Farong? Is what you said true? Chapter 573. Yu Qianqiu revealed an expression of, "You don't understand me," and solemnly replied, "Don't look down on me just because I do things in a flashy manner. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm actually a very low-key person. Women belong to me. I am sincere to each of them. I don't need to show them off just to prove that I am a man. I only told you this because you asked me. Otherwise I would have kept my mouth shut." You're speaking in such a dignified way. Nongzhu said word by word with hatred, "You're shameless." "You mean me?" Yu Qianqiu pointed at his own nose, a look of confusion on his face. He didn't know what kind of medicine this fellow had eaten to fall out with him just like that. He retorted angrily, "No matter how shameless I am, I didn't do that kind of thing." He was not like some people who thought that they looked impressive and went around swindling people, fooling around with each person they played with. If you ask him to count how many women he has played with in his life, I'm afraid he can't even count himself. How could he be qualified to criticize others? What the hell? I've never seen such a shameless person before. Bah. Bang bang. Nongzhu turned the table upside down. The tableware such as bowls, chopsticks and plates fell on the ground. She pointed at him and shouted, "Who are you talking about?" When Yu Qianqiu turned hostile, he was also someone who wouldn't be swayed by force or persuasion. He immediately sneered and said, "I'm talking about whoever did that kind of thing. Poor thing." In the Moon sect, Qianghua lonely shadow faced Leng Hanyue. Missing you but not seeing you. Women met but didn't know each other. Heartbroken year after year. It's so miserable. I don't know who did it. I dare you to say it again. Nongzhu shouted angrily. It seemed that she was about to hit him. Mr. Nongzhu, you are famous in the world. You are very powerful. I can't afford to offend you, but I can hide from you. I won't say it. Yu Qianqiu put on an expression of trying to keep the peace. He glanced at the mess on the ground, shook his head and sighed, "Hoeing the fields at noon, sweat dripping into the soil. Who would have thought that every single grain of food on the plate was so hard? Damn it, your father really knows how to talk. It's just a pity that this land is full of food." Nongzhu let out a muffled groan. She held her chest and staggered a step back. She bumped into the chair behind her and sat down. His face was pale as he panted heavily. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Yu Qianqiu without blinking. Today he finally witnessed what it meant to be sharp-tongued. His head buzzed and he felt the blood in his chest rising. He almost spat something out because he couldn't hold it in. His lips were tightly shut, and he couldn't speak even if he wanted to. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He secretly smacked his tongue and reflected on himself. Oh my God. Back then, I made a nascent soul cultivator vomit blood in Ongquangsung. Am I going to make a soul formation cultivator vomit blood today? The higher the cultivation, the better the ability to piss people off. Wasn't it a bit too much? After all, he was not an outsider. But he shouldn't have gone too far. He also understood that people who had reached such a high level of cultivation would have opened up all the blocked meridians long ago. It was a small matter for them to be injured. But once they were so angry that they vomited blood, it would be a big problem. They were even more terrible than ordinary people. If their qi and blood were in disorder, their meridians would be damaged. It was not much different from being possessed by the devil during cultivation. It would take a long time to recuperate if it was light. But if it was heavy, their cultivation would be destroyed. It was not a joke. Don't be angry. If you want to scold me, I'll let you scold me. I won't fight back when you hit me or scold me. Yu Qianqiu sincerely admitted his mistake. Then he asked weakly, "Are you all right?" "En?" Nongzhu's hand that had just been put down pressed on his chest again. His chest was rising and falling rapidly. He quickly closed his eyes, put his hands in his dantian, and silently ran his qi to regulate his breath. How could he be angry like this? Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he covered his mouth immediately. He was afraid that he couldn't help but say something else. However, he didn't expect that Nongzhu, who was so thick-skinned, couldn't stand the provocation. He was so surprised that he didn't dare to speak easily. After all, he was not someone else. If something bad happened to him because of his anger, he couldn't explain it when he went back. After a long time, Nongzhu's flushed face gradually returned to normal. He slowly breathed out and opened his eyes. He stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was standing there obediently for a while. Suddenly, he showed an expression that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He sat there alone, shaking his head and giggling. He had never thought that someone could actually anger him to this extent. Good Lord. Every word was like a knife, piercing the soft spot. It was really a deep attack. Even his cultivation at the middle stage of Huashan realm almost couldn't bear it. Who would believe it? His smile didn't matter, but it scared Yu Qianqiu. Was he so angry that he became stupid? That would be a big sin. Yu Qianqiu was a little scared and asked carefully, "Senior Nongzhu, are you okay?" He asked the question 3 times, but he was still giggling. He was completely panicked. He flashed over and grabbed Nongzhu's wrist to check his body. Bang. Nongzhu slapped his hand away, stood up, and scolded him fiercely. "What are you doing? You want me to die early, don't you? Let me tell you, it's impossible for me to die. Even if you die, I will still be alive and kicking. Damn, I'm so angry." Yes, I was wrong. Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed, patted his chest and said, "Damn, I was scared to death." When he was too angry, he became much calmer and didn't think so impulsively. Nongzhu regained his calmness. Looking at him with a lingering fear, a trace of warmth flashed through his eyes, and then he became indifferent again. He said, "It's rare. You didn't want me to die early." "What are you talking about? I'm so honest. I burn incense and pray for you whenever I have the time, and I wish for nothing more than for you to live a long and healthy life." Yu Qianqiu said these kind words in a heartwarming manner. He was truly afraid that this paper-thin guy would do something bad again. Now he found that Nongzhu's mental age was really different from his actual age. Wasn't he being childish? Stop. Nongzhu was angry and funny at the same time. She said, "You are so busy, and you still have time to burn incense and pray for me? What were you doing just now?" Yu Qianqiu wanted to defend himself, but he was worried that Nongzhu would be irritated again. So he swallowed his words and corrected himself. He said, Yes. I deeply recognize my mistake and I will change. I'm sure you will be satisfied." Is it really karma? This is fate. Nongzhu shook her head helplessly. Glancing at the mess on the ground, she relaxed and stared at Yu Qianqiu. She sighed and said, "Don't talk nonsense anymore. I have something to tell you. You can tell Z when you find the right opportunity. I believe you can seize this opportunity." Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled face and asked, "What is it that you can't tell Z directly? Why do you want me to tell her? Is it about the relationship between you two, father and daughter?" Nongzhu shook her head sadly and said, "It doesn't matter whether Z recognizes me as her father or not, because I didn't really fulfill my responsibility as a father. I'm really ashamed of her. You can tell her that her father's name is Xiaoyao and I, Nongzhu, am just her teacher. What I want you to tell her is the past of her father, Xiaoyao, and her mother, Qianghua Fairy. She has the right to know this. I can't hide it from her forever." Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. It was interesting to gossip about a handsome man and a beautiful woman. However, seeing Nongzhu's unprecedentedly lonely expression, he had to restrain himself so as not to irritate her again. He nodded and said, "I will try my best to live up to your trust." It was a beautiful day. We met in the green mountains and clear waters and we fell in love at first sight. Everything seemed so beautiful and I really fell in love with her. However, such a beautiful beginning couldn't end well, which was beyond my expectation. Nongzhu's handsome face was full of confusion about the past. He traveled across time and space and slowly told the story of the past that had been covered in dust. Some things are destined and you can't avoid it even if you want to. It turned out that Nongzhu really fell in love with Qianghua Fairy at first sight. He didn't just play with her like other women, but really wanted to be with her forever. Therefore, he planted the crystallization of their love in Qianghua Fairy's body. Otherwise, with his cultivation, how could Qianghua Fairy get pregnant so easily? In fact, from the beginning, Nongzhu knew that Qianghua Fairy was a cultivator and thought she was an individual cultivator. However, with the latter's cultivation, she couldn't tell that Nongzhu was also a cultivator. Since Qianghua Fairy didn't mention her identity as a cultivator, Nongzhu didn't tell her either. At that time, Nongzhu was blinded by blind love. He only hoped that they could be equal and didn't want to compete with each other. Therefore, he didn't tell her that he was a master in the Huashan realm. He didn't want to scare Qianghua Fairy more or less. After going through the long life of mortals, he was used to seeing too much deception and was somewhat tired of it. He just wanted the love between them to be purer and less distracting. He thought that maybe Qianghua Fairy also thought the same, so she didn't tell him that she was a cultivator. He thought that with their relationship, it would be a great surprise when they told each other the truth. Because the love between the two of them would not be limited by their lifespans and be too short. Just think about it, how could they not be pleasantly surprised? Nongju had already thought about it. Once they knew each other's cultivator identity, he would take Cheonghua Ferry back to the South Sea Purple Bamboo Forest and live a carefree life. After Ziyi was born, Nongju was overjoyed. But at this time, Cheonghua Ferry suddenly told Nongju that she was a cultivator. She was a disciple of the Moon Clan. Nongju didn't care about her identity. With her cultivation, she could take away a disciple from the Moon Clan and no one would dare to stop her. But what Cheonghua Ferry wanted to say was that apart from being a disciple of the Moon Clan, she was also the successor of the next leader of the Moon Clan. Chapter 574. What surprised Nongju even more was that the Moon Clan had a secret that they didn't tell outsiders. All disciples of the Moon Clan could have children outside, but if their daughters were talented enough to cultivate, they had to bring them back to the Moon Clan and cultivate under the Moon Clan. If it was a son, the Moon Clan wouldn't accept him. It was better to let the man carry on the family line. Because the Moon Clan never accepted male disciples. Cheonghua Ferry felt guilty and told Nongju that she was going to bring her daughter back to the Moon Clan to cultivate. She asked Nongju to find another wife. As for her, she was going to continue the Moon Clan sooner or later. She couldn't spend the rest of her life with an ordinary person like him. One could imagine how angry Nongju was at that time. He had lived a carefree life among the flowers for half of his life, and it was not easy for him to settle down and give his heart to her. He did not expect this to be the result. She felt like she was cheated. Plus, with her cultivation and status in the cultivation world, how could she allow her daughter to cultivate in a small Moon Clan? That was the biggest joke in the world. With her cultivation of the soul formation state, she couldn't teach her daughter better than a small Moon Clan. Plus, Nongju couldn't let her daughter follow in the footsteps of her mother. Nongju didn't care about the leader of the Moon Clan. Nongju wanted to kill her way to the Moon Clan and raze the entire Moon Clan to the ground. But thinking about it, she felt that it would be too easy for Cheonghua Ferry. She lied to her so badly. If a man who didn't fall in love easily found out that he was cheated after falling in love, the consequences would be terrible. Plus, he was a very powerful and capable man. Nongju was determined to let Cheonghua Ferry taste the feeling of being cheated. She would regret it for the rest of her life. Cheonghua Ferry knew that Nongju wouldn't be happy if she did that. However, her daughter was in her hands and Nongju couldn't take her away. She kept persuading Nongju, saying that it was for her daughter's good and that she didn't want her daughter to be like him, an ordinary person for the rest of her life. Nongju only sneered at that time. But she didn't expect that Nongju was a legendary cultivator of the soul formation state. It would be easy for her to take her daughter away from her. Therefore, on a sunset, the viburnum flower fairy had just gone out to grab something and turned around. When he came in again, he found that his daughter, who had just been placed on the bed, was gone. She immediately guessed that it was bamboo, so she looked around. However, it was impossible for her to find Nongju with her cultivation. Since then, the jade flower fairy had never seen the man called Xiaoyao again. Her infant daughter also disappeared with him. Nongju naturally brought her daughter back to the purple bamboo forest and taught her carefully. From then on, the Southern Sea Purple Bamboo Forest had a female disciple called Zi. For the sake of her daughter, Nongju completely gave up the habit of flirting. Of course, Jasper Flower Fairy also played a part in it. She had broken his heart completely, and he had learned from her painful experience that he would never touch another woman again. Yuqinsho was dumbfounded. He opened his mouth wide and didn't know what to say. So there was such a hidden story. It took him a long time to come back to his senses. He swallowed his saliva, scratched his stiff chin, and looked at the absent-minded Nongju, speechless. At that time he thought that Nongju the playboy abandoned her and played around. As a result, she got pregnant and gave birth to a baby. Then she ran away because she was unwilling to take responsibility. He never thought that the most handsome man in the world was dumped by his sister. Unbelievable. Thinking back, Yuqinsho couldn't help but smile bitterly. No wonder Nongju asked him to find a chance to tell Ziyi about it. Thinking about Ziyi's strange life, how could Nongju tell her? Even if he told Ziyi, he would have to find a time when Ziyi could accept it. Damn it. Would Ziyi take things too hard and say that I'm talking nonsense and fight with me? What? No way. In this case, it would be more appropriate to let Ziyi's future husband tell her. Why did she come to me? She was trying to hurt me. Yuqinsho pinched his chin and his face twitched. Ahem. But, Senior Nongju, I think. Nongju slowly turned around and said, What do you think? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and smiled bitterly. I think this kind of words. I think Ziyi's closest person should tell her. Think about it. No one else can find a good chance for Ziyi to accept. Only the person closest to her can find a chance. Don't you think so? For example, the man Ziyi is going to marry, right? It doesn't seem appropriate for me to tell her. To be honest, I'm a little scared. Let's see then. Just keep this in mind for now. By the way, Nongzhu sneered and said, the man Ziyi is going to marry also has 3 or 4 women. I'm a little worried. I'm afraid Ziyi will be wronged in the future. What do you think I should do? Damn it. Why don't you just let Ziyi marry me? Don't let the goodies flow to others. Yu Qianqiu cursed in his heart. But thinking about it, maybe in Nongzhu's eyes, his future son-in-law was one of his own, and he, Yu Qianqiu, was an outsider. Thinking about it, he was a little angry. He immediately patted his chest and said, that's easy. As long as you say it, I'll find a way to do it for you. It's just 3 or 4 women. If you want to kill me, just say it. I promise you'll do it without anyone knowing. Your son-in-law will never suspect you. She wanted him to stay by Ziyi's side and live an honest life. If he dares to marry me in the future, as long as I know it, I promise I'll make Ziyi unique. If he keeps doing it, I don't mind making him a eunuch. The corner of Nongzhu's mouth twitched. She smacked her lips and said, I believe you. You're the best at doing this kind of thing. It won't be a problem for you. Her words made Yu Qianqiu a little unhappy. What did she mean by, I'm the best at doing this kind of thing? He curled his lips and said, Senior Nongzhu, I never do this kind of thing. Only when you say it, I'll do my best. This is called keeping promises and valuing credibility. Forget it. It's fine as long as you have the heart. Nongzhu waved her hand and asked, if I want to marry my daughter to him, should he give me a betrothal gift first? How much do you think I should accept to marry my daughter to him? Yes. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, you're kidding. Mr. Nongzhu is famous in the cultivation world. Your daughter is even more precious than him. How can the betrothal gift not be enough? By the way, is your future son-in-law rich? Nongzhu thought for a while and said slowly, rich? There are many treasures. Any one of them is a rare treasure. But that guy is a miser. I'm afraid it's a little difficult for him to take out a big gift. Any one of them is a rare treasure? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up and he swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He couldn't stop clicking his tongue in his heart. I knew it. The son-in-law that Nongzhu likes must be from a powerful family. I don't know who he is. If I want to build a relationship with him in the future, even if he's a miser, I'll pluck some of his feathers. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu said indignantly, the richer a man is, the more stingy he is. He doesn't even want to give a big gift to his wife. It's reasonable for a poor man like me. Why won't he give a big gift even if he has money? How can you swallow this? Tell me who the bastard is. I'll avenge you sooner or later. He had already begun to plan in his heart. After torturing the World Chamber of Commerce, his next stop would be Nongzhu's rich son-in-law. Speaking of him, I'm full of anger. I don't want to talk about him. By the way, what about you? Nongzhu asked. What about me? Yu Qianqiu didn't know why he asked this. Nongzhu said with a fake smile, I'm marrying my daughter. Aren't you going to give her a gift? **ck. You don't have the ability to get your son-in-law's betrothal gift. Why do you want me to give a gift? Is there anyone who asks for a gift from a guest before they even get married? I'm so easy to bully. Yu Qianqiu curled his lips and said with a smile, that one came in a hurry. He didn't bring anything good with him. How about this? On the day of Ziyi's marriage, I'll definitely bring a gift to congratulate her. No, you have to receive the gift before you get married. Nongzhu said seriously. Receive a gift in advance? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said suspiciously, how come I didn't know there was such a rule in the cultivation world? This is the rule of my southern sea purple bamboo forest. Nongzhu's face stiffened. Then he thought of a suitable reason and explained, furthermore, you're very busy. When the time comes, you won't even know where I'm going to inform you. While I'm here, it's good to receive the gift in advance. Don't tell me that you're so stingy that you won't even give a gift when Ziyi gets married. Hehe. What are you saying? Am I that stingy? I'm just thinking about what I should give her. Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily. However, after thinking about the close relationship between him and Ziyi, it would be a little inappropriate to give an ordinary gift. Subconsciously, he touched the storage bag on his waist and found that it was gone. Only then did he remember that it was taken away by Nongzhu and was lying on the ground. Nongzhu had already checked it. If he took something out from it, it would be a little inappropriate. So, he smiled at Nongju and put one hand into the clothes on his chest. He pulled out another storage bag from under his armpit. Nongju's eyes twitched. She thought to herself, there's another storage bag on her body. Yu Qianqiu reached into his storage pouch and pulled out a sword with simple and unadorned patterns. He held it in his hand and examined it. But then his regretful expression turned resolute. He said straightforwardly, this sword is the same style as the one I gave to my master. They're both treasures of that immortal. Since Zi is getting married, I have nothing to say. I'll congratulate her with a generous gift. Senior Nongju, you won't say that I'm stingy, will you? As he said this, he held the sword with both hands and handed it over. I sincerely wish Zi a happy life. Nongju's eyes lit up. She took it and touched it. As expected, it was not inferior to the one she gave to Bai Changchun. She couldn't help but praise, good sword. Then, she nodded with satisfaction and said, you still have a conscience. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.